Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Starbase Weekly. My name is Mauricio. This is episode 72, I believe, and I'll pass this to Indian Star.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, good night, everybody. This is Indian Star. Welcome to episode 72. Today, we have a special guest with us as well, Dave. Dave, would you like to introduce yourself?
And good afternoon, good morning, everybody. Thanks for having me on the stream. And we're going to take this over to Thomas, who will be driving today.
Thanks, Dave. Jax and Zach are out today, but it's going to be interesting. We've got a lot of content to go over. So I guess let's jump in. Mauricio, you did awesome photos yet again. You took these on Sunday of last week, right?
Well, Sunday is this week, right? Or is that still considered?
Sunday's this week.
This week, yes. Within the past 7 days.
Yeah, so I guess, we did it on Sunday because we weren't sure about the weather. And I think it was a good call because we tried doing a flyover on Friday and it was just awful out there with the cloud coverage.
I could see pretty deep into Mexico here. That's really good. So thank you for doing that and making sure we get these good pictures. All of the week has been kind of hit and miss so far, right? As far as the cloud coverage and everything else. Mauricio?
What was the question again?
The cloud coverage has been kind of hit or miss for most of this week. Is that right?
Well, yeah, it's been like that for the past. It's just a time of the year, March, April, and usually around May it starts to clear up, and we have a little bit better weather. Flyover weather we usually don't delay from the past for the past year or so. So it's we're just playing it by ear, honestly. So the next flyover, I'm not really sure when it's gonna be. It could be Sunday, it could be Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. One of those days. So
I'm just looking at the video that you posted yesterday, because we were looking at a potential for yesterday, but it was no potential. All the clouds are just not cooperating at all. Like you've got like one or two little spots you might be able to just sneak a peek of what's underneath, but otherwise you wouldn't be able to see very much. Well, so I guess let's go ahead and jump over to Massey's then. So we've been having a lot of excitement at Massey's this week, and especially Thursday and Friday here. We had two different kind of events going on. So first off, I guess we could start with what happened with 26.1. It actually went through a full cryo test on the Can Crusher stand, which is also now a puck shucker. At least it's got the capability for a ship design version of a puck shucker. And a puck shucker basically means it's got the hydraulic rams. They push up onto the thrust puck underneath. So that's where the engines mount. It looks like it has all 6 of them. So 3 sea level and 3 RVAC. and that was quite a show. And I think I've got a few pictures here. Find the right one. There we go. So this is just a photo quickly from Lab's view from Raptor Roost. You could see that it was full cryo.
And this shows what the weather was like this week. You could barely see it.
Yeah. So being able to see through the clouds most of this week just wasn't going to happen. And so Mauricio grabbing the Sunday photos with such a clear day was so perfect. We got a lot of detail here. But yeah, that's the test article here. And they've basically, where going through and securing it down to the pads, they've got some like throwaway pads that are plates that are bolted down with some basically extra reinforcing elements along the bottom edge. So that was all pretty much done prior to the test, and we were kind of expecting, it's like, okay, it's ready. Now it can go any day for the next, 2-3 weeks. That's usually what happens, is we look at it out on the outside and it's ready, but they're not ready. They don't have the test schedule or cryo or whatever it is that they need to make sure everything can be done. But in this case, they had the piping all connected and everything else, and we're just like, okay, crossing our fingers, hoping they'll do it. And they did. Last week, we actually had a little bit of an interesting issue, which was a fire. It was between the 26th and the 28th. So it was on the 27th, they tested the nose cone. And at the same time, they seemed to have a fire. So I'm wondering if that was hydraulics related. And Dave, you work with hydraulics, right? What do you think on that?
It could have been. I mean, the normal fluid they're using and we use are just a white mineral fluid, so it is flammable. They're not using a special aerospace non-flammable fluid, because why would they need to?
Yeah, we did also get the results. I think it was 3 light stands, a scissor lift, and a
one teleloader.
Yeah, one teleloader.
Yeah, it was not a good day for United Rentals. They got a little bit of an insurance claim out of last week.
But luckily, everything else seemed to be fine.
It was also not a good day for the nose cone. It got a little wrinkly.
Yeah, let me actually grab just a picture of that, because at least this week, because there was testing at Massey's, we only got these the flyover pictures from Sunday, and last week we did have a pretty good view of that, but it's just a good throwback here. So this will just take 1 second.
It was a very obvious crinkly nose failure. No questions whether there was a test run on that nose last week or not.
Yeah, so it looks pretty mangled.
I don't think it's quite as aerodynamic as it used to be.
Oh no, it definitely isn't. And it's interesting to kind of see that the areas around the pins is an area that it did also fail, but it also failed everywhere else here. So, going through and looking at it, it's pretty much a test to failure.
Yeah, they didn't stop it right away, or else it really failed spectacularly in one failure. But I got a feeling this was an accumulation of a couple of different failure modes before they finally stopped.
Yeah, I've seen Nose Cone 12 when it was doing its test, and it makes these loud pops, like somebody took a hammer to the steel plates, or somebody was throwing a steel doors on a trash can or dumpster shut, and you just loud bangs over and over again. And you look over, and the dents appear, disappear, appear, disappear. This one, obviously, they appeared quite dramatically. I'm curious from a hydraulics standpoint. If it did catch fire and it was, let's say, during the test, because that's probably a good chance, because it's the same day the fire happened, this was going on, or at least within the 3 days. What would you see on, like, maybe they weren't planning to do a test destruction, but they did because the forces were higher than on that because of the hydraulic fire or something. What do you think?
I would expect it to go the other way. If they had a fire, it would have depressurized the system probably, and you would have had less power, not more.
Okay. So if they did the test at the same time that fire happened, the fire was probably just after they had tested this. Was
Yeah,
my
yeah.
thinking
I
then.
mean, my guess is if anything, it would have been afterwards because it would have been a test termination event. Definitely.
All right. Well, I just wanted to go through and figure out what's going on with that nose cone. Even though it's a little bit of older news, it's still kind of relevant because we're still trying to figure out, exactly what happened. I don't know what the source of the fire would have been. If anything, I'm just thinking hydraulics or hydraulic fluids. We talked about that before, Dave. So I'm just wondering, how would it typically ignite?
Well, and the one I heard as a possibility is because of all the light stands, and it happened. If I remember right, it happened in the evening. They could have just been refueling one of the light stands and spilled either diesel or gasoline, and another one was working and it caught fire.
Ooh, good point. How hot do the mercury vapor lamps get? Do you know?
Um, they get hot, but a lot of those stands these days are LEDs.
Okay. So yeah, if they're not going to be that hot, I wouldn't see them just igniting spontaneously due
Yeah, well,
to
and they've
anything
usually
else.
got a if they're mercury vapor or high pressure sodium or whatever, they've usually got a safety shield across the front of the lamp because if they do explode, which those lamps are known to do, you want to contain the glass so it doesn't shower down on people. So they're usually pretty safe. I don't remember. We'd have to go back and look at the ground photos to see if they were round or square lamps. The new LED ones tend to be square ones on top of the stand. The high pressure lamps tend to be round reflectors.
I can double check again real quick here.
Those look like high pressure. Well, it looks like maybe one of each. No, those look like high pressures.
Okay. Yeah, but yeah, it's pretty bad. And the weird thing is, you could see that there's a trail here. It didn't really get the scissor lift too bad, but you could see it was burned on the other side a lot more. Didn't look like it ruptured the batteries or anything. But yeah, you can see these two light stands, probably downhill from here, or maybe it's the opposite way, that it's downhill this way, that the fire went through with some liquids.
Yeah, and the only liquids would be fuel. I mean, diesel or gasoline, depending on what the various things use.
Yeah, one thing I did see is we're missing the connection system for the hydraulics. It should be here, but it's just not. So I suspect that caught fire as well, because it should be there, or at least sitting around this area.
And what is it that you expected to be there?
The
Hydraulics.
the hydraulic
Yeah.
pump unit.
Might actually have another picture here
While you're
of that
digging for a
location.
picture, Indy, I see we have a bunch of donations.
Yes, I'm actually mono channel right now. So, Dave, if you want to read them, you're more than welcome to.
I only have to go back and find them because it's
Okay.
streamed by here. I can do it.
Okay.
Let's see. We go back to T. Evans gifted a membership. 55 Chevy guy Steve. Let's get this train a rolling. $5 donation. Sharpie, choo choo. Let's get this train going for $20. And Sharpie says he was in South Korea, so he couldn't donate for the last couple of weeks. So this is a makeup donation.
Thank you,
And then
Sharpie.
Yazada, okay, I'm on. And Pete 2.0, choo choo. And Joey Bag of Donuts, $10 for Chugga Chugga. And Pete 2.0 was $5 Australian. And 55 Chevy guy just donated another membership.
Thanks, Dave. Back to you, Thomas.
Yep, thank you. I found, I think, one of the images I was looking for. But this area right in here, there was something that was a metal structure, and it kind of no longer is. But yeah, I can't really tell more than that. On this photo, I'm looking for just a little bit more zoomed in. Let's see. Anyways, these are for the the drone flyovers from last week. But yeah, I don't really see it zoomed in anywhere else except for a couple of spots that I've enhanced Mauricio's picture here. But maybe this one might right there. Oh, yep, there's a little bit better. You can see there's some sort of structure right here that's just gone. So anyways, that was the other piece that I think may have disappeared in that little fire there.
And then in addition to testing all this, we had a cryo test of 25.
Yep, 25 did a full cryo test, and I've got a little bit of a video of that I can scrub through here. So this is courtesy of Lab Padre. I'll just scrub through it because I don't have it set to go any faster here. But yeah, they did a full cryo test on both the LOX and methane tanks. And then I remember it basically vented or started venting about 5 hours into the whole thing. So it was a long test. But this is about when it started wrapping up. And about 5 hour mark, it basically just venting everywhere. And it had no frost lines at that point. Or if it did, it was just very imperceptible. So, I mean, there's 3 tests already under our belt within the past week and a half. So we've got the first nose cone, then 26.1, and then ship 25. And part of me says that they're just doing tests on ship 25 to basically commission this whole system because they're looking at procedures, they're looking at all of the basically the fields of values that the ship and the fuel farm is supposed to basically provide and make sure that they get all that right. And there's a lot more testing in the future that they can do at this site. So I always call it the Massey's testing site, just because that's what it is it's a testing site. And it's also giving the homage to the former owners of the site, which used to be the Massey's Gun Range. Larry's put a lot of effort into this place, and then it changed hands to SpaceX, and you can't really see anything left besides, I guess, this dirt road back here. That's about it. But it's still a really cool place that I've been able to visit, fortunately, at least once. On accident, actually. I took the wrong turn, came down the road, and it's like, this is where I ended up meant to be. And, hearing gunshots going off, going, at least this is the gun range. But yeah, they've got the stand here, which has the hydraulic rams as well for a ship, basically puck shucking stand. So it looks like they're removing all of this from test stand A. So these are the 6 hydraulic rams. Actually, there might be 7 because there's a center one that pushes up and down in a different way. But anyways, the cool part is that they will now have a puck shucking station here instead of at test stand A, which test stand A, if it works out to be right, all you do is static fires. Same thing with test stand B. I guess another quick thing, we've talked about this before, just think about this element. The hydraulic pucks, we'll actually use these to stabilize it before you lift the ship and put it on it. You want the pucks to basically have a left, right, and vertical element to help prevent it from shifting around. And that's
You're
the same
talking
thing.
about the pins?
Yeah, these little stands, and we saw these at Sanchez. These pins or stands that are basically just giant poles. But yeah, we were looking at Sanchez and thinking, oh, are those for the new water deluge system that's the second stage or something like that? And no, it just turned out to be for this. But it was kind of cool that we were looking at them, we're trying to figure out what they're for, and then they just ended up over here, and we're like, oh, okay, that's where they're going.
It also looks like they have been doing more dirt work next to this pad. They've been rolling the dirt out to make another area there that might be getting some concrete just as a crane base maybe or something.
I think so. I mean, I would actually have extended it up just a little bit more as a crane base because the 2 locations that we really are interested in is basically that first one, which is the puck shucking stand. And then the second one will eventually be a booster stand, but you shouldn't need much on the crane side over here. It's mostly, well, actually thinking about it, it's just really lifting the ship from here, putting it there. That's what this pad would all would need, because they don't need to do anything with a booster. It just sits there. And we actually figured out some other stuff last night about the booster, which says that they're getting ready for booster cryo stands to be installed here at Massey's, at least. Nothing yet, but there's one other element that's come up at Sanchez that is kind of neat. Let me see if there's anything else that pops up here that we should go over. And do we have any questions while we're still here?
Yeah, we have a question here from Mini Dr. M. Next Twitter Space Elon interview, could you ask about if S-25 will fly, the purpose of S-26, and the strange edgeless ring section?
What was that last part of the question?
About the ring section at the ring yard, the one that
The
people
two
have
with the two with the
Oh.
20 holes.
Yeah, those. That would be a really good question to ask Elon, but it's a very specific one, so you have to get the terminology right. It's like 20 holes with mild steel plate on one, and there's another one over at the windbreak that has 20 holes with a stainless steel panel. So that terminology is the trick to getting that question right. And so I think Zach would definitely love to have that one asked. But he's more of the stage zero kind of guy, and he's going to be really interested in that. So hopefully he can do both for us.
Interesting. The catch pond for the burst test article is filling with rainwater,
Yep, it is.
and they're not pumping it.
Well, I mean, it's supposed to be a stagnant area, I guess. That's what this part would have been, anyways, for a burst test. The strange part to me is that they've got water back here as well that they're not taking care of, and I guess to focus in on mosquitoes is a big problem here. So you're either gonna have to take care of mosquitoes in here with the bacteria, but I don't think you can because it's right next to the Rio Grande. So yeah, you just have to pump everything out. One thing that we're still looking forward to, or maybe we've already had, is a burst test from this tank of 6.1. So booster 6 is basically what this is. There's still like an aft section that was floating around for a while, but this is what's remaining of it. And I wish we could actually see a different kind of burst test. So we talked a little bit about this for like Dave and a few of us, where it's like if you had an option to do a particular kind of burst test, it would actually be cryogenic and using a little bit of explosives. Because there's no way to properly test a flight termination system. You can only test it on a cryogenic article, and SpaceX is hardware rich, so I'd love to see them testing it with this. So a new, basically FTS system, test it on a tank like this with cryogenics, and there is a outlet right here that you can bring cryogenics all the way over to a burst test like this. But in this case, the burst would be very much under the control of SpaceX, and they would be able to determine how well it worked for a shaped charge that's longer or whatever they need to do. Because the issue is, we talked about the 40-second delay from the point of the FTS being initiated to the explosion of the Starship and the booster. It started really with the aft section of the booster and worked its way up, and then the Starship, for some reason, decides, well, a few seconds later, I'm going to go too. Which was really odd, considering they were just spewing out methane and LOX for that entire time. So, Dave, anything else that you'd like to add to that?
No, the only thing I do note is they took the new puck chucking stand out of the tent and moved it over, but they didn't quite take the whole tent down. Does this mean maybe they're going to work on another stand of some sort in there?
It would be useful area for welding, but it is strange that they took the whole thing down if they're not going to do anything else.
Well, they took one side of it down, but this part is still there, which is like the back half of it, which is interesting. Intriguing, we would call it.
Yeah, we're always intrigued by everything they do here, and trying to analyze and understand what the purpose of everything is. And one of the things that we also will talk about later on is the orbital fuel farm. I wonder if they're going to use any of these horizontal, and Elon calls them hot dog tanks.
Yes.
So I wonder if we're going to use any of these three. And then I heard a rumor, and I thought it was from you, Dave, but it was the rumor said it was Anthony saw some stuff coming down Highway 4 for the GSE, which was I guess they're the manifolds. There was another one that was about the tanks themselves. Maybe that was the one that you were talking about. Do you remember talking about some tanks that were coming down from like Canada or something?
There's a rumor that there are some large horizontal tanks being road transited across the U.S. from the northern border headed towards Texas. I haven't heard anything more since I was down there.
Okay, so it was while you were down there that was going on, which I mean, it does take a while to get some of these tanks moved because you have to go through and find the routes and set up the routes in advance, right?
Yeah, and you can only travel certain hours of certain days because of different states' requirements for oversized loads.
Oh, today's a Sunday. No oversized loads allowed. It's like there might be some funny stuff like that.
Well, it's like a lot of areas with large cities. You can't move oversized loads through the metropolitan area during morning and evening rush hour, or maybe during the day at all, and you can only do it in the middle of the night because they realize you're going to impede traffic, and they don't want you impeding their high density rush hour traffic.
It took 6 hours took 6 hours to travel 3 hours because of
it makes
these.
for unhappy workers in their cities.
Yeah, I can see that. Well, hopefully those are the tanks, and they are coming down. But things have also changed on the other side when we get to the fuel farm. So it's gonna be very interesting.
So do we not call it the tank farm anymore?
Which part? The orbital
tank farm, orbital fuel farm.
They're all usable. So I just might use different terminology, but orbital fuel farm would be OFF, which that just turns me off on that one.
Well,
No,
of course, we did have the confusion factor of the orbital tank farm and the orbital flight test and the orbital test flight.
Yes, that was fun, wasn't it?
yeah, orbital tank farm, OTF, orbital test flight, OTF.
Had the integrated test flight, which was SpaceX's way of getting around that problem. And then we don't have to define orbital either.
Yeah, I liked that because it wasn't quite orbital, but it was getting close to those orbital speeds. It was like 10 to 50 meters per second difference between orbital and not, but we never even got that far with 7. So we'll try again, I guess, with Booster 9 and Ship 20 something, because we don't know on that one either. That was something Elon had specifically said they will let us know in basically 3 weeks on Twitter Spaces, unless he tweets it beforehand.
Yes, we got about 2 weeks left to wait at this point. Well, I think we're about done with Massey. Shall we head towards the Sanchez oil site?
Yeah,
Look at
well,
Dave.
former OS out, but do we have any questions or donations to go through before we get there?
We have a donation for $10 from James, who says, "Cam help after losing cams." And then also we have PayPal, and I'll read those in a little bit.
And we also have a RGV membership gifted by Jim Cavett.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, James, and thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Jim.
Thanks, everybody. I don't have any questions here on my end. There was one question, but it already got answered, so we can move on. But
Awesome.
yeah, thanks everybody for donating.
All right, moving over to Sanchez it is. So Sanchez is one of my favorite sites just because it's always got something going on. I mean, kind of everywhere now at SpaceX has something going on. But we've been going through and figuring out some interesting details as of, between Sunday and today. There's been quite a few developments. First off, we've been looking at, let's start with Mega Bay. This is all Mega Bay material, just piled up everywhere. Everything that's pretty much white, except this pile. Ignore that. This is all Mega Bay in here. And they've gotten even more material coming in the past few days, so this is even probably half of it. There is quite a bit.
And I did see some ground photos, not from Mauricio, somebody driving down Route 4 that saw two of the columns for the first floor on trucks headed towards Starbase yesterday or the day before.
We did have
They're on,
some pictures of those columns from Mauricio from last week.
yeah, these are actually on the truck because they have the big feet on the bottom as the first floor column.
Okay. Um, Let me see if I'm going to grab a picture real quick here and see if this is the same one you are thinking of or a similar one. Is that what you're thinking of?
That's similar, but it's not the same one. The one I saw had the foot at the back end of the truck.
Ah, okay, close enough. It's just that it is the foundation column, so that you've got what we call the embeds. Will go through here. They're basically like giant nuts that go into the concrete. I'm sorry, giant bolts that go through into the concrete with nuts that will go on the top of here, with washers and everything else. One thing that Philikin and I were talking about specifically on this particular item was the question of how much more could this mega bay be able to withstand for weight. So, for instance, there is two bridge cranes in the current mega bay. Each one has a capacity of 150 metric tons, and it's a question of, well, what if we could go with like two bridge cranes for the new mega bay that each one could carry a booster, which is going to be about 250 metric tons. So in order to lift a whole booster right now on mega bay, you have to use both bridge cranes to do that. But what if you could do, two bridge cranes, each one able to lift a booster independently of the other? That would basically be like 200 to 300 ton lift capacity.
Yeah, well, as Phil Kid pointed out last week, the vertical column here is a massive beam. I mean, those are 4-inch thick steel pieces. If you look at the 4x4s they're sitting on, they're about the same thickness as the beam itself.
Yeah, if I remember right, these are always exactly like, what was it, 2 inches for these little stripes. So
Yep.
I'm looking at that. That's like at least 6 inches here, 6 inches here.
Yeah,
That is
they
so
are
thick.
massive beams.
Absolutely. I remember seeing things that like these are supposed to be 12 inches here, and that's never the case. It's really just only this is 2 inches, and that's the only measurement you can get. Otherwise, it's 80 inches from here to here. Uh, Otherwise, yeah, the stripes are not a great measure guide. But this is beefy.
It's beefy.
Hey, where's the beef?
I think only you, I, and Dave are old enough to know that commercial.
Oh no, it's still relevant.
And
But the funny thing is, the company who did that commercial no longer has beef really in their patties. They're just really thin. They're paper
What?
thin.
Are you
Yeah.
serious?
Yeah, I don't go there because of it.
They still have
So,
the best shakes.
those were really good shakes, yeah. And I won't call it the place by name just because.
Next to In-N-Out, of course.
Well, there is that. And we now have those in Denver.
But moving on.
Yep. So we do have a lot more news because we've got basically Sunday's view of what was going on. They're putting up the first columns, and then we went to let's go to the ground photos here. Pretty much on Thursday they were done with the one on the right, and the one on the left here is was within 2 hours. Vic said that this entire thing filled out. So I think we've got a tweet directly from her on that.
Yeah, if you look at Vix's tweet, those two pictures are 1 hour apart. All the Z-girts went up in 1 hour.
Wow. And that's pretty much just on the left-hand side there.
Yeah. That's
Wow.
one whole 2-story wall section got Z-girted like on an assembly line. I mean,
That's a great way of being able to do it as quickly as possible. So we talked about those column foundations. They have to go through, get those installed first before they can do the corner sections here. So it's the first layer followed by the second layer, which is going to be what they're building on these pads here.
And it was more obvious from the ground photos versus some of the more oblique Sanchez photos. Those frames, the jigs they're building them on, those are not close to the ground. They are so high up in the air. I think they can drive SPMTs right underneath them.
Yeah, I mean, this is not a big enough crane to move it around, and obviously SPMTs is a simple solution. They've done it before. So there's these concrete pads right here. There's 3 of them that were built just so that they could move around the integration tower sections. So you just basically put a SPMT underneath it. The SPMT actually can lift itself up because each wheel is able to increase its height. They basically put more pressure on the hydraulic system to do that, to lift it up. But the same thing happens here. They go underneath. It's pretty low, and then it rises up, and then it just is able to pick it up, and you're able to move out of here. And the SPMT wheels can go in any direction. You can curve it. You can do all sorts of weird things, but it's neat to see that they have these available. These will probably end up, I think, as staging goes, eventually end up just right over here at the corner, because like they've cleared this entire lot out. We talked about this last week, but this is a great spot to basically have your building construction going on. So they already have the foundation floor columns that we're talking about here that will go in this area on the Mega Bay. But we'll get to that here in just again in a bit. But there's a lot of crossover between these sites so far. There was something else I think interesting about this area. Oh, right, water deluge, or steel plates that are like a steel plate sandwich. Elon called it also a pancake, a shower head. He had all sorts of descriptions for it. But we did figure out some interesting little details here. So we were looking at this interesting little steel plate right here. It's probably at least 2 inches in thickness. I've measured similar ones at that same thickness. And I also measured that this is 2 feet-ish, which is about the same thickness as the other ones I was looking at. But it goes with this. So there's an interesting pattern that you can actually find if you look really closely, is that there will be a large hole, a small hole, and it just keeps repeating that up until 5 small holes. This is the same. It goes large, small, all the way up to a large, and then 5 smalls. So there's a total of 16 holes here and 16 holes here. It did take me a little bit to find the 5th hole here. So I'm like 1, 2, 3, 4. Where's the 5th? Do you spot it, Dave?
Left side next to the middle hole.
Yep. It took me quite a few hours to find that, but there it is. It's the 5th hole in order to connect it.
As is typical with this group, yes, we're examining individual pixels in the image.
Yeah, I had to look at multiple images to get that, and I think there was just one from a similar perspective, but I don't know where it is. It's always funny to look at the images in one way or the other. But anyways, that was the pixel finding that I had to do. It's just that dark spot really is the next hole. So they have to elbow up. So they'll use something similar to these, how they basically go through an elbow directly up. So it'd be pretty small. However, I think Chrome Kiwi, he went through, looked at these and found that there was enough of these to do these connections in here. So we also found another cool little piece looking at pixels yet again. This has 9 holes in the very far back end of it, which corresponds to the same depth and number as these 9 holes. So it's probably going to be very similar on these. So they have the 9 holes that will basically go through and connect directly to the steel plate. I'm not sure if we have Chrome Kiwi with his diagram available to throw that up, but he had a pretty good one. I know that some other artists as well had good renditions of this, but basically the water deluge system will basically be this part, and then all the water coming out of it is technically a deluge. But this is technically also a flame diverter, as well as like a what is it called? It's autogenous. No, not autogenous. Shoot, auto-regenerative cooling is one way to call it. There's so many different descriptions and names, but it's a really smart idea that basically you're running water through two steel plates. The top one, which should be this side, is the plate that receives basically all of the blast, but it is cooled from the inside. And this should also have perforations. I think it was like 16 square feet was the total square footage that, if I remember right,
I think it was. I think he came up with 19 last night.
19. Okay, I just can't remember for the life of me. I'd have to redo the math real quick to get it quite right.
Yeah, I think it was 19 point something.
Yeah,
which
so
is pretty good size area, but spread it out over the entire size of this steel monstrosity they're building, and per square foot, there's not that much area that's going to have to be accounted for.
Yeah, it was 19.63. That's just simple area of a circle. This is a 5-foot diameter. So 5-foot diameter would basically go from here, and then the rest of these would be at least 19 and a half, I'll just call it, square feet in total. So you just basically have perforations in here, and then whatever other things you might have. You might have spouts directed with a little bit more flow. So you're basically covering water, the surface with water a bit, but also water coming up from in between the plates. The surface won't stay very wet for long, though, based off of how the Raptors handle it. They'll heat it up, turn it into steam, and wick it away very quickly.
That's the goal, though, right? Sorry.
Say that again?
That's the goal, though, right? Steam and water?
Well, it's to turn the water into steam and basically remove as much heat as possible away from the plates, because these plates have additional panels going this way that support it. So the support structure and support element is being protected. It's basically submerged in water, and it's going to be stainless steel as well. And the ultimate goal is you're basically protecting the structure on the inside and then the structure on the top. So there's a really funny way of looking at it. If you ever have a campfire, you just take a paper cup, fill it with water, and if you have like a metal grate that you can sit it over on the fire, you'll basically sit there singeing the edges of the cup, but never burning the cup itself. And it'll be just like a wax paper cup. And the reason why is because it boils off the water on the inside. And it's basically a similar method here. But if you can get water on the outside too, makes it even better, because you don't have the damage happening nearly as much. So one of the issues that Elon described it as, he was like it was 1 inch per second or something with a blowtorch. He made that analogy, and it's like, yep, there is, let's see, 7,500-ish tons of thrust with like some gigawatts of energy. 1.21 gigawatts. Yeah, not quite a DeLorean, but it is stainless steel and plenty of energy. But yeah, anyways, the system itself is looking to be coming together, which is a huge plus sign. We also found that this pipe has moved over to this position over the period of the week. So let me go through and look at that real quick. Oh, this is the wrong one.
There was a question on the timeline of the water deluge installation from John T. What is the latest time estimation for installing the deluge plates and plumbing? I guess if we're going off of the timeline that Elon gave, what was it? I forgot, 4 to 6 weeks, something like that, 4 to 8 weeks.
Yeah, it was like 4 to 6 weeks, and then he also said something about 2 to 3 months. And I've heard that their schedule, they're pretty much at it or ahead of it now, which is good. But I still kind of wonder about that schedule of like getting all of the upgrades to the orbital launch mount, maybe, because the vehicle itself helped make the hole for them. But in the end, it's a question of how much more time will it take to test out Booster 9 and ship whatever, because they'll need to go through do static fires on those. They haven't done any of that testing yet. So they'll also probably need to go through and retest their fuel farm because things have taken a lot of damage. Electrical lines, pneumatic piping, just a whole range of things that needs to be replaced and repaired and confirmed that it works. So they'll have to recommission that.
And one last question. This one's for me. Elon did mention that the vertical tanks will be replaced with the hot dog ones, right? And is that after the next flight or before?
I think that's going to be after the next flight, not before the next flight, based off of just one piece of evidence. So it might be flimsy on that one, but it's the only thing we have so far because Elon didn't say if he was going to be replacing it before or after the next flight. We just know that it's going to be replaced. It's just a matter of when. That was not ever answered from Elon.
I don't know. Elon has an actual time frame, or at least accuracy when he gives off his time frames.
I think it's going to depend on how repairs to the whole site progress and when tanks start arriving versus when they have the OLM ready to relaunch.
Well, according to Elon, that'll be in 2 months.
Is that Elon like 2 weeks? Because 2
We'll
weeks
see.
was like 2 years later.
Well,
We'll
it was.
definitely see.
He said 2 months, and then he actually said 6 to 8 weeks.
Which is 2 months.
Yeah,
Rough.
2 to 3 months, and then 6 to 8 weeks. They're pretty much the same thing.
Not 3 months, friend. That'll be 12 weeks.
Oh, right.
Well, 6 to 8 regular weeks or Elon weeks?
That is the question.
Very good question. I was going through showing these pictures to my dad the other day, and he's like, "What are these?" Oh, these are the transport stands for the booster. Like this was part of a booster. Speaking of which, I think I do have a good top-down view of this, but it's one of those little. This is the perfect one right here. You realize there's something wrong here. It looks kind of green on the inside and very dark right here. It's full of water and algae.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So if they've got mosquitoes in the area, this is where it's coming from.
So the truck needs to come here and spray.
They need to drill a hole through it, and I feel sorry for the poor person who does this, but they need to drill a hole through it and get rid of all this water because it is just stagnant, and there's enough shade in here that it cools down the water and keeps it pretty much liquid for the most part. It doesn't dry out unless you get weeks on end of no rain.
You think that water's a little bit warmer than if it was like inside of something else? Because the steel might warm it up a bit if it gets even whatever.
Ew.
It's a bit warmer, but it's still cooled down because of the shade. So the circle itself, like this is pretty much noon on noon from the photo perspective. This is as much sun as it gets because otherwise it starts casting a shadow from the east or the west, and you're not drying this out nearly fast enough. But yeah, it's gonna be kind of stinky over there. Everybody's gonna be like, "Has anybody taken out the trash?" There is no trash. Well, where is that smell coming from? This is the answer.
How do they actually clean that now? Can they open a valve and all the water pours out and then scrub it?
You could open up a valve or drill a hole in it. Either one of those will work, and you'll just have
Throw
water
a pump
coming
hose
out.
in it. Yeah, throw a pump hose in it.
Oh,
And
that's
then-
just easy, Dave. That's just too easy.
But then you'd have to if this was going to be for use, you'd have to really scrub the inside because you have the potential of that green gunk just leaving remnants.
Well, luckily, this is not going to be for use. This is Booster 8, which was skipped.
Right.
They had this was the twin to Booster 7. It's the twin that didn't make it. They oftentimes will make two of them because they'll make an improvement, and sometimes they'll skip the older generation and go to the newer one, or sometimes they'll use both of them. So, for instance, Ship 5 and 6 were basically like twins in that sense, where Ship 4 had some other difference designs that were closer to Ship 3. And Ship 3 crushed, Ship 4 blew up, 5 and 6 made the launches, and so they did confirm that it does work. You can land these things or launch these things that are pretty tall. And the same thing with Hoppy. Actually, Hoppy was the singular one. It didn't have a twin, but it is a water tank, so it's a bit more particular. It was literally a flying water tank built by a water tank company with a Raptor rocket engine installed at the bottom. So that was a very unique version. And kind of talked about this a little bit with the algae or whatever that's growing in here. I heard that Booster 4 basically had something like this going on. Not this bad, but bad enough that there's basically saying, nope, it got into the engine inlets, and there's really small micropores in those. So, yeah, there was no way that Booster 4 was going to fly after that. And I'm kind of glad it didn't, because then we would have seen some different types of failures, like what it would look like if the launch mount blew up, for instance, with the booster attached. Like, that's the direction that could have gone, because its design, even though it was fleshed out quite a bit, it was still undercooked, especially on those Raptors. Those Raptors were Raptor 1.5s. Now we're Raptor 2s, and eventually getting to Raptor 2.5s here. The 2.5 have more thrust than the 1 or even the 2. So I'm excited to see the results here in the future. Was there anything else? We did talk about a bunch of other little odds and ends at basically the Sanchez side over here. Like we would looked at these pieces, they fit together. There's 2 of them here, and these 2 pieces, they're basically connected together. Make a ring, but we don't know what size ring that would make. It's not the header tank size like this. It's not even meant for other systems. It doesn't quite fit the Starship puck, but it could, because it's got that little plus sign, so there'd be some gaps, but again, it's just a really weird configuration. Otherwise, might be closer to a booster center 13 engine like puck mount. So maybe that's what this was intended for, but it's just been sitting here kind of like scrap at this point. A lot of stuff is being thrown over here as scrap. Literally wood pellets that is scrap. Not even scrap, it's just garbage. Wood garbage.
Would that not be scrap?
Yeah, it would be, but it's a different kind. There's metal scrap, there's wood scrap.
Yeah, we made the distinction between trash and scrap the other day.
Yeah. No trash, scrap only.
I guess we can make a comment about the dog that didn't bark in the room here. For anybody that missed last week, the big manifold has snuck away and hidden itself.
Yeah, that one's the one that we said would probably be over at the GSE building, or at least somebody said it was, according to Anthony at Rocket Ranch. Need to actually confirm that with him, but otherwise, it's gone. It's obviously gone.
So speaking of this manifold, Stan J wants to know, where did they go?
Okay, so I'll give a quick view of where we think it's at. So we think it's inside of this building, because that was the direction apparently that it was headed. But there's a chance it's not here either. There's a chance that it just got scrapped, which throws us for a loop, because it's like we thought that water manifold was going to be used for something. Maybe not. Maybe it's just direct line pipes with no manifolds, no resistance on that system, because they're just going to pump water directly at it from the tanks. Actually, not pump, push, because it's just a pressure fed system without any pumps or motors. But yeah, that was just a quick idea of where it's at, based off of one piece of rumor. But yeah, Anthony, he lives down there near Rocket Ranch, so I believe what he says. I just don't know if he actually said it. That's the fun part about these things.
And he lives at Rocket Ranch, no?
Yeah,
Yes,
I think so.
He lives in he lives in his camper at Rocket Ranch.
Right. And he owns Rocket Ranch, correct? Or is one of the partners?
One of the partners and the manager.
Seems like a nice guy from all of his tweets.
He is.
Seems like it.
Yeah, you stayed at Rocket Ranch a few times, right, Dave?
3 of the last 4 times I've been down there, yep.
Wonder where the other place you stayed at was.
Hotel.
The first time I was down there, I was at a hotel at 69 and 4.
Okay.
Are those freeways? Highways?
Yes, Highway 4, our favorite Highway 4. When it gets into Brownsville, the expressway there is 69 or 77, depending on which number you're using. It runs from Corpus Christi down to South Padre.
Seem to be having an issue here. Can you still hear me?
I can now.
Yes.
Okay. For some reason, it kept going to the beginning of the photos there. My keyboard's dying on me, I guess. Hopefully, it doesn't keep doing that. But anyways, the interesting thing we've also talked about a little bit last week is that this area, they kind of basically dug it all up, scoured it, made a couple of large dirt piles. One of them was this top coat, this darker, it's almost like a clay type road base material. It's not road base itself, but it's useful to keep the dust down. And they basically had that pile and another one. And I kind of wonder if they installed these drainages actually at that point, because these, I don't know if they were there last week. Let me double check that.
Well, the one along the side of the road was there because that's the line of them that run up the roadway. See the 3 of them?
Yeah, I know that these were there. I just don't know if these 2 were there or not. Kind of the ones that throw me for a little bit of a loop, because they seem to be digging in here as well. They made it a little bit more accessible for their drainage. One issue is you don't want to dump it directly onto the neighbor's yard, but that does kind of happen with gravity. They want to get it down lower to here, so it goes to this location and then down this way, basically out to the mudflats. That's the direction it's supposed to take. We still have those 4 grid fins right here, so that's great, but everything else has actually been really well cleaned up. So when we look at the ground photos here, let me see if there's actually anything we skipped so far. Oh, those 2 trucks are back. Same trucks, but different parts. So we talked about this a little bit ago, that the Mega Bay parts are still coming in. Let me get to the other side here. So yeah, it looks pretty clean and open along the grounds here. I think I was actually supposed to look at this photo, not the other one. Yeah, so we've got just a few things, like we've got the kettle boiler, so the heat exchanger for replacing or adding to the current fuel farm, the orbital fuel farm. And I think we have 2 of these, right? One's still over, or should be still over at the trekking station. I still need to double check that here. But yeah, it looks pretty well organized, and I see additional shelving here as well. I'm kind of hoping they kind of stick the shelving out into the road a little bit so that you can just get more area, because they've just got tons of stuff everywhere. They obviously needed, like, not just one tent, but like 2 or 3 of them. Sanchez is kind of the inventory site.
Well, the east half of Sanchez.
Well, I mean, it kind of all is if you look at it. I mean, you've got inventory here, over here. Let me see if I've got there we go, perfect, a wide shot. So it's like, this is all inventory. Even United Rentals over here is inventory. And then they've got a little bit of inventory over here as well. And then this area, actually, we looked at it and found it's pretty much just their new scrap area. So we have this new shielding system for a welding robot, and then 2 levels for other welding robots. I think these are from possibly even Tent 3, because I'm not sure where these came from, but they look similar to the ones they had at Tent 3. That's where they did the studs and other things. They look like they're about to scrap them here. So they've got a single ring ready to be scrapped, a lot of scrap material in the bins, and pipe, and it seems like they're going away. But one thing that's interesting about scrap sometimes is somebody else comes along and says, "Oh, I think I could use that," and they'll recondition it for something else. But here's another view of this, basically welding hood. So it's to protect your eyesight when you're walking into the tents and walking around while it's doing its robotic welding. This will basically be up against the ship or the booster, and you just can't see anything from the other side, which is good because it uses either autogenous laser welding or TIG welding. Both of those are very damaging to the eyes if you don't have protection. Also, we have some interesting good news. The puck that is from the old, I don't know, like this would be boosters 2 or something like that, 2, 3, something around there. It's a really old puck that was over at the tracking station, has now made its way over here. We say this is a good dining room table piece. So if you're in the market for a new dining room table, here's a really expensive one for you that you can't actually buy because other restrictions.
Well, the only problem is you got to have a mansion because that's like 6 meters in diameter.
You have to build your house around it. Yes. But it's just a fun idea that I kept saying, like, it's a coffee table. It's the round table. Would be fun if they actually did have this set out somewhere as like an area to do lunch with, and they had the pipe stands underneath just to make it work. Just some of those absurd ideas are just the fun that we like to go through. Can actually get a. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Speaking of the fun, I just wanted to remind everybody that if they want to make donations, PayPal is a good place to make the donation, as well as YouTube. You're welcome to use YouTube, but PayPal takes the least amount of money off the top for their services, which means Mauricio gets most of the money you donate, which means most of your money goes towards our flyovers, and that's very helpful for all of us. And I think Mauricio will go ahead and hopefully pin the URL in the chat. If not, I know Astro Joe, he's on top of everything. So he would also be able to post it in the chat because he's good like that. Along with Astrogen, also very, very good.
By the way, I found an argon tank. I think this is one over, it says on, what was it? Assembly Tent 1. So it's either in front of it or inside of it. So
it also says liquid argon, and there was a conversation that this is for nitrogen. Remember?
Well, this code would indicate something like nitrogen, but basically what you're looking at is this will displace gas, so it displaces oxygen. Argon, it will displace oxygen. Same thing with the nitrogen.
And it makes sense because they've highlighted it to show the difference. So they're obviously intentionally wanting you to pay attention to the fact that this is argon.
Yeah. So this is argon. They use this for shielding gas. So while they're welding pieces of the ships and boosters and all the components and the stringers or whatever else that they're attaching, typically they'll use TIG welding, and they'll use basically a shielding gas so that you don't get oxygen or nitrogen or anything else into the weld. You're basically using an inert gas, which is argon. It's a lot like helium in that sense. So helium would work, but it's extremely expensive. So that one gets canceled, and argon's denser, has more protons, but it doesn't have any ability to chemically bind to anything, just like helium. So they're noble gases, and it's kind of interesting that it's just sitting here. I guess they're really kind of wrapping up on tents 1 and 2. I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that they start building over there on the Star Factory side of the Highway 4 end of the Star Factory, which would be like phase 3, 4, something like that, because they've got other pieces that have been placed in there. Let's see if there's anything else I think we should go over.
We have a couple questions here if you want to answer them. One of them was from Yasada. If you go all the way down to that lot that's empty, the one that's for sale at the bottom, right next to it, there's that corner area at Sanchez, and Yasada was asking what it's used for. That corner that I think you mentioned there was for like ITAR stuff or.
Yeah, so this is ITAR as well as hazardous materials. So materials like you can see all these steel drums are out in the middle. So if there was to be a fire or something, it is away from everything else. That's a way that you protect yourself from, and you can even see that they've separated them from each other, so that if there is a fire, that you can put it out. But you know that these are hazardous materials, that their smoke could be hazardous or dangerous to their health, or to health or safety. Again, that's why it's away from everything else. And then there's ITAR materials potentially as well. It's just a secured fence, so nobody's supposed to be in here except authorized personnel. There's only one access route, which is this gate. That's that little section in here. I'm not sure what the particular chemicals or ITAR restricted content would be, because I don't think I see any raptors in here. There might be other materials that could be ITAR related, but I'm not sure what they are.
My guess would be if they are, they're in the container under the solar cells.
Yeah, what kind of small things would be ITAR in your opinion, that are restricted?
Most likely, it's going to be Raptor parts, injector stuff like that. Less likely here than McGregor or Hawthorne, but they might have spare parts here.
Yeah, I'm thinking that all of their spare parts for Raptors will be ending up in this location right here. So this is Mega Bay, obviously, but this little extension off the back of the building, they have 2 bridge cranes in it, and both of them are able to hold, what was it, like 1.5 tons, 2.5 or something like that. It was just enough for the Raptors, I think.
Yeah, it was like 3 tons.
That sounds right. Because yeah, the Raptors are less than 3 tons. I'm thinking of like the 2-ton Raptors. That at least they've said that they're 2 tons. I'm not sure if that's quite right, because when you add the thrust vector control and other hosing and elements to it, it does increase in weight a bit.
We have another question here from GAT 1975. Do we think the pipes under the see-through plastic canopy are being powder coated? Over to your left.
So there is some sort of painting going on here. It could be powder coated. It could be a couple other things. This is a little bit better view. So they obviously had some wind issues last week, and this is probably what happened with the wind. And then so when we took or Mercio took the picture on Sunday, we had these 4 pipes were already just sitting here ready to get painted. This one was a different one that I think is probably compatible with the dimensions of these other ones, but it still hasn't been painted, or it's just a bit older. There's 2 I-beams right here that kind of have some cross bracing. We've seen something similar to this over at, what was it, Slick 40 at Vandenberg? Not Vandenberg.
Slick 40 would be KSC.
Yeah, KSC. Kennedy. Anyways, the Cape. So we saw that they had a nice rainbird system. Basically, the rainbirds be on the top. There's 2 I-beams. Oops. One going here and one going here, with just a couple of cross sections with pipe going up the rest of it. This was kind of a black color before they brought it in. It's really strange is that if you're going to, let's say, do like a powder coat, I would think that they would sand it down to its bare metal, because otherwise you are relying on this material itself, whatever this is, primer, whatever. You want to basically get it down to the bare metal as much as possible. I've played with epoxies and then even powder coats, and it's not good to just stick it on a paint on top of other paint, not unless it's been rated to do so.
Yeah, and I would guess not powder coat, because powder coat you have to cook. You have to bake it.
I mean, it gets hot out here, but not that hot.
Right. You got to get it up to its melting point, which you're not going to do unless you have a kiln to put these in.
Yeah.
We have another question from SLS. It's okay. Do we have any idea what the scaffolding around Booster 4 is? And is it possible that Booster 4 will be used to test out the Booster GSC at Massey's once it's installed?
Actually, the answer is yes, I think, on all of the above. Let me scroll down here to look at Booster 4 real quick. I must have just passed it.
Yeah, you passed it. It's past the image. It's down.
Right there.
This is 20. Oh, this is the one right here. This is what I was looking for. I thought it was more zoomed in, but this is perfect. So we have 2 major changes, and this is probably going to occur to all of the transport stands. So this is booster 4. This is, the old stuff. And I think there's two things to say about this. First, they want to keep boosters and ships at the Rocket Garden at all times, but soon that's not going to be an issue. They're going to want to use this transport stand for something else. And the major element is there's this structural load member right here, this I-beam, that says there's going to be a lot more weight on this particular article than what the transport stand was originally used for. So the transport stand, just being able to move it around. They have done cryo with it before, but not like full cryo, if I remember right. But now they'll be able to do cryo with it, and this is going to be able to take a lot of that load for cryogenics. So you're going to have nitrogen, which is denser in the methane tank, and then probably liquid oxygen in the oxygen tank. So that works out pretty well. And then there's these other parts that have appeared on all of the booster transport stands. Call them the Mickey Mouse ears, or maybe the ghosts from what is the one with Pac-Man ghosts. So they kind of look like those.
Oh yeah, they do. Wow. Okay.
But the other part that as I'm kind of talking about here is these are new elements. And Dave, you had thought about basically being tie downs for something, and I think I might have an idea of what they could be doing with them. So if this is going to indeed be part of a cryo test, basically stand for all of the transport stands, they could be going through and using these 4 points to basically wrap a mesh or some ropes basically around the booster. So if something does give, it doesn't go far. You just basically have the ability to keep all that material from damaging other things at Massey's, because that's where I think this would be headed up for all of the transport stands and all the boosters. They end up at Massey's.
Yeah.
They'll do a cryo station over there. They haven't started building that quite yet, but the speed at which they did Ship 25s, I have no doubt that they'll be able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly a good idea. I don't know what these are for, but they just look like they're meant to collect forces from two different directions.
Yeah, I'm thinking of a net that just goes off in different, like goes this way and goes this way, and they kind of make a crosshatch pattern or something. And then the other thing is that you can easily just throw a bolt through here on a shoe, or whatever that's called. I can't remember now. Not turnbuckle. Darn.
A shoe that you're talking about?
Well, it looks like a horseshoe on one side, but it's got a bolt that goes through from both sides.
Shackle.
Shackle.
Yes, the shackle. So yeah, you could shackle it all up. That was a question that was asked yesterday, and again, that's a really good idea where this could be. We don't know for certain that that's what all this is, but based off the structural load, that's the best guess that we can look at right now. Unless you've got a better idea, anyone in the comments, you can type exclamation mark questions, and
Singular.
and
Exclamation point question.
question. Oh, okay.
And
So
lowercase q works best.
interesting. So yeah, that'll if you have an answer you think that this would all be for these and this that go together, would love to hear your ideas. Let's see if there's anything else that we can wrap up here on Massey's while people put those ideas in.
We don't have any more
Not Massey's,
questions
Sanchez.
here from the chat, but yeah, if there's no more questions, we can move on if you want.
We have donations, though. Several donations that I'll go ahead and read off right now, Thomas, while you're breathing.
Sure.
We want to welcome a couple of our newest members. Please forgive me for butchering your name, but I'll say your last name, Saad. They just became a new member. Welcome to the team. And also Zero Fox. Welcome to the team. We also have donations from Cranky Old Man, who donated $10 and says for fuel, plane rental, and sunny treats. We also received a donation from Jim Cavett, who donated $10 and says Mauricio's Flying Fund. Another donation from Scat1975, who donated £5 and says, though he's late, we don't mind. He just so late again, and we're just glad he's here. Phil Smith donated £5 and says, excellent coverage. Many thanks from Heather and Phil. And once again, our regards to Heather. Sean Lynch donated $1. And then we also have PayPal donations from Jim Cavett, who was very kind and donated $10 again. Sunny Treat Fund, thanks RGV and team. From Crane Man, who donated $10.01. And from James Liu, who donated $25 and says for Flyover picks. Thank you all for your donations and welcome to the newest team members. Oh, and Jack. Jack also donated a membership. And so if you're in the chat, you have the ability to donate memberships to people who don't have memberships, which is a really cool way to get people involved and also get them into the team member tiers so that they can receive the photos themselves. And that's the best part about this whole thing. And that's it for me, Thomas. Oh, one more thing before I go. If you haven't already, go ahead and like the stream if you like what you hear. That way, and if you hit that bell icon, you'll get notified of when our next shows are. And now back to you, Thomas.
All right. I guess one other thing, if there's no other questions or ideas on the booster here, or at least this transport stand, one other thing to quickly mention: Ship 26 is still attached to the crane. The answer and reason why is because they have the manhole non-pressurized. It's open, so they've got a little bit of a screen that protects from birds or insects or other FOD from getting inside unintentionally. It's not a screen. It's just a plexiglass door, I think. But anyways, it somebody referred to it as a guillotine because, well, it slides up and down, and I don't know how they latch it in place, but it does look a bit precarious, and it's not enough mass to do much, and it's not sharp, but it's just awkward. But yeah, let's move on over to I guess the build site. One thing that we keep looking for each week on Mega Bay is windows, and so far, unfortunately, we haven't found any. So just looking
we found
through
the windows. They just haven't been set up yet.
Yeah, well, they're inside, but yeah, they are. You're right. They're not set up, but we do have these vertical elements which are just beyond the scaffolding. It's kind of blue in color, or kind of aqua blue. Those are for the frames for the windows, and so they are getting close to being installed. It's pretty much, I think, within the next week or two, those will start popping in. One thing we said ages ago is that we'll probably see them appear, the windows appear and be installed after the first orbital test flight. And so far, that's been correct, which is kind of an interesting way to go. I think it's more of coincidence than anything, but it was like, why are they waiting? Maybe they were wanting to see what the damage from the Raptors will be from sound pressure waves or anything else. I did read one story in the media, which was that there was a gym somewhere. I don't know where it was, but they said that a window broke during the flight. The funny part was that the owner wasn't there and nobody else was there. They just know that it was broken after the flight, which, I mean, that's tenable at best. But it would probably mean it was a poorly framed window. Probably had a stress point if it was caused by, let's say, the launch. So it would have probably broken eventually in the wind anyways. But yeah, anyways,
At the end of the
Mega
day,
Bay,
if a broken window is all that happens after a 33 engine launch, that's not so bad.
it was really 30 at that point at what, 80
point.
to 70 something % thrust
Fair
total.
point.
But yeah, it wasn't bad at all. I heard about sand getting to Port Isabel. I mean, that's pretty much what happens with the Sahara Desert in Africa. It blows sand all the way over here. Even not Mongolia. I'm thinking of the Chinese Gobi Desert actually gets sand kicked up as well.
The Gobi Desert's in China?
Yeah, it's part of the north west end of China. In fact, they're doing this whole thing about what's called the Great Green Wall. It's kind of an interesting experiment because they messed it up back in the Red Revolution. But anyways, speaking of green, this stuff is fake. But anyways, the power distribution that they are running in here, they only had 3 of them last time with this small 4th one, but now they have 4 total, which is great to see that they're getting ready to run it, and they've got it all coiled up so in a figure 8 so that they can basically pull it through without it getting tangled. Otherwise, you have to have it on a spool like this, and So they have got plenty to do and run here. They're getting ready for power distribution from was it called Magic Valley Energy. So that's the current distribution platform. Let's see. Actually, that's a quick, comparison of those three spools.
Are we at the ring yard?
We're not quite at the ring yard yet. And now that you're mentioning it, I might need to grab Jax's knowledge.
Yes. But the ring yard, the most important thing on the ring yard, or the newest change, I should say, is pretty cool.
Oh, now I'm trying to think of what the newest changes that you're talking about.
The top-down photo from last week with naming.
Correct.
Oh, that, yes. I need to actually go to this one right here. Because that one, it has the detail that we're looking for.
Check this out, peeps.
Yeah. I honestly do think this is for Mauricio. I mean, the size is big. It's like executive parking only, that kind of thing. But like this is pretty big. So I think they kind of said, "Hey Mauricio, we know you like to fly, and we're going to help out the ring watchers and really confuse them because this is obviously not a dome. This is not a dome. This is just a stand for possibly just a barrel section, but it is labeled everywhere, which is perfect. Hopefully they will stick to the labels on the ground because the idea here is that you will have, I think, a flow from right to left of inventory and parts that will be used at the Mega Bay. So you basically pull apart, you bring it into, not the Mega, either the Mega Bay or High Bay for stacking. So you pull apart and then you basically go through and bring in the rest of the parts closer. That's something that they basically use a forklift to do. And then they've got a couple of these where they're still working on the inside on the scissor lift. Maybe this goes away. I don't know. It's just still a really funny element to see one of these like running around with a forklift on one side and a forklift on the other, pushing and pulling. Anyways, the labels themselves are hopefully going to be useful in the future for themselves and for us. But right now
they'll put the actual correct thing on the correct label.
Yeah.
Hey Thomas, do you mind zooming in all the way so people can read the labels?
Yeah.
And just leave them there for a bit. And we got a message from Procky saying, "Why did they steal my label job at the ring yard?"
But it's not in yellow, Procky. It's not in yellow. Nor is it in, maybe it's in his same font. I don't know.
Well, it's not got his outline around it in yellow either.
That we can change very quickly, though, because it does have the double white lines around it. So maybe they did steal Procky's idea and they just colored it white. Oh, Procky. Here, registered things are important.
Well, that's the difference between white and the yellow. Okay, this is actually a dome, so that one's correct. Hooray!
It's a do.
It's a do. Yeah, it's a do. There's a E-I. Doi. Anyways, it's a Star Factory dome like the rest of these, which...
And the booster ones are very unique, too. Because they don't have the same sort of labels. They're labeled, but differently.
Yes, so they call them gross acreage, a booster gross acreage.
Which means what exactly?
So they have a lot of them.
My guess is that means they don't have to say if it's a dome or a barrel. It just belongs to the booster tribe.
And they are very tribal there at SpaceX. They literally have a Raptor tribe, a booster tribe, like they even have people who are former Falcon Heavy tribe, I guess you could say.
So then my question becomes, is everything in the booster exactly the same and everything or the things in the ship slightly different that they feel the need to specifically label the ship ones and not the booster ones?
Well, I think it would be more of this in general is what they're headed towards, not the forward and aft domes and all the domes and stuff like that. I think it might be that it's just lots of LOX tank, lots of methane tank, and it's only describable by the stringer. So I think these are all pretty dense on the stringer. So these should all be booster LOX tank sections. So that's where gross acreage really means we have just a lot of this particular part, but of course, just acreage just means area, so it's all booster area. that's another way to look at it. They can do one of both ways. I think that was it for the labels. Like they still haven't painted some of these, but over the next flyover,
I don't think they will because they put the SpaceX symbol in there. So
the
those are just
SpaceX
spare.
symbol I think was already there.
Not in the circles.
It wasn't? Okay.
No, because if you look on the left, there are ones without them.
Well, there's also a lot of dirt here. So, like, there was an X here, but mostly blew away. They needed to do a little bit better job on some of these spots, like sweeping up where this A was at and the F. So
I
this
don't
will be
think they care like that.
Starf Tory, whatever that means, because the A and the C will be gone. But yeah, that's a really neat area for looking at the ring yard. This is going to be very complicated here pretty soon, I suspect. So they have also gone through and basically working on a irrigation system, not irrigation.
Drainage.
Yeah, water drainage. Yeah, water drainage. Sorry. Basically, they're collecting all the water. There's 3 pipes that go over to the mud flats this direction. But basically, they're concreting in this area in very soon if they haven't done that already. And this will probably be its own ring yard in here as well, because I mean, this is a ring yard. Why not this area? There's already rings just kind of sitting here waiting for a spot to open up. And they are going towards a factory method, which will be a little bit more consistent. And I think it'll be saying this will be, they'll probably need to paint over these lines and start over again, or pressure wash the lines off, whatever the writing is, and say something along the lines of, these will be all of these particular parts for a Starship in the order that it's going to be stacked. And then they're going to probably repeat that, because one of the directions they're headed is one ship and booster pretty much being built each month. And eventually they want a Starship built every 3 days. That's the goal. That's the aim. That's years away. But you want your process to basically be an input-output process. You don't want to have it basically be a minefield of, I have to move this one around to get to the one in the middle of everything else. You want it to be able to just be input, output, and then be built in the high bay or the mega bay or the second mega bay. I think that should be called the Michael Bay, because it's going to be bigger and badder than the rest. The foundation is got rebar so thick that people just can walk on this. This is walkable. This one you have to tread yourself a little bit more carefully, but they've already filled all of this in. We were looking at the ground shots. Let me just jump over to, was it right in here close by? It's either this one.
What is it you're looking for?
Just that ground shot. I think of just a little bit of concrete right there.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, just that concrete right there shows me they've already finished the Mega Bay.
The foundation for, you mean High Bay 2 or Mega Bay 2 or whatever the new bay is called?
Yeah, the Mega Bay 2 or Michael Bay, whatever you want to call it.
Ooh, what was the sign that we saw that there was a suggestion that might be the name?
Oh, there was a sign that was for. Now that one's
heavy metal construction.
It'll be that's for this area here that they're doing, and there's a question on what's going on with that. We'll still, probably ask around, and there'll be eventually an answer on this. But
Thomas, slowly. You're gonna get everybody a little bit sick.
Sorry, I'm trying to just scroll to an image.
You just passed it. Go up 3 rows. There it is.
Yeah, so this is the sign that we're looking at. So this is for basically the Star Factory Phase 2 or 3 construction. So they basically saying heavy metal building construction. And then this is the strangest part. It says private property, no trespassing. This area on the county records shows it as public road and right of way. So in order for, let's say, SpaceX to call this private property, they'll need to go through the abandonment process to be able to access this. And then there's another little problem with that, is that this is the historic San Martin Trail. This is called San Martin. But basically, there was a historic trail that it still actually exists to some extent through here. It goes off into the mud flats, but this is where people used to travel and trek across quite consistently. So there might be some historic problems by doing a abandonment process on this area. And there's also a lot of additional properties actually back here that they would go through and be restricting as well. So people take their ATVs and go off to their little properties over here. Some of it's in the mud flats, but a bunch of this is also U.S. Fish and Wildlife. So some of it, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife would be like, hey, we don't like people traveling through here, but that's county property. So it's a really weird one that we still need to find out more on than this one.
Yeah, exactly. You were talking about the private properties. I had totally left that out. There's a ton of private property over in the wetland as well. So there needs to be an easement for that. That was private roadway there.
Yeah, exactly. So this is San Martin going through here, and then basically all of this property going from here, or actually here, all the way through till way up here, is all supposed to be owned by the county. And then there's private property parcels up here, and then up here in the mudflats. So, like we've talked about, the abandonment process could occur specifically over here on Remedios. So Remedios, all the way up to here, or I'm sorry, pretty much from here all the way up to here, is basically owned or leased by SpaceX. So I know the gentleman who owned this parcel of property right in here, or I've met him before at least, and been standing there taking pictures, and I think SpaceX didn't like the pictures. And I was just like, I'm just curious to see what this stuff is. I'm not sharing them yet, and I just want to figure out like where this all goes. And security just kind of kept moving their truck around block views. It was really funny. Anyways, this area has been basically looks like leased by SpaceX because they bulldozed this entire spot. I don't see any transfer records of property quite yet on this. And a lot of that actually happens where they just lease it, which doesn't show up on any of the records I have access to. It'd only be in like SpaceX's records and maybe county records if they want to show the lease and the actual history with it, but I don't see any of that. But yeah, that's an interesting and important question to answer. And there's still like a couple of holdouts like this one right here. I think it was like Novus Prime Realties or something like that that owns this little parcel. It's landlocked between all of SpaceX. So like, how do they get access to it? Apparently this sidewalk, if they were ever to try to access it, is the only route that might work, but it's still like, this is SpaceX property. This is SpaceX property. This is actually right here, technically, property of, I think, what was it? The Texas school, or whatever this was, RGV, like this, the Rio Grande Valley. UT RGV.
University of Texas. Yeah, University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley campus.
Yeah, so I think they own this, or part of the parcels here, but they've leased it out again, and they didn't have any other buildings in this area. This is the only one that was the one that they are currently leasing to SpaceX and the property adjacent to it here.
It is
But yeah, it's just
interesting where that ring is, where the school or the university building is, that the no, on the right, that the ground is like rust colored right there where the ring is.
Yes, so they do a lot of welding right here. It's like a outdoor welding station. They've got this this little crane that's a not a bridge crane, sorry, it's a gantry crane. See if I've got a slightly better view. Ah, this is much better. So it's a little bit of an angle. But this is the area where they make these. So there's like kind of 26 of these little spots. So it's just for rings and holding ring sections. And I've seen other versions of this locally here. I just don't remember where now, but I saw another one. Yeah, and there's one of these that has gaps for like two of them, but it's basically just to hold ring sections, and it's just a ring transport stand.
And just diagonally to the left, that's a different ring structure, but is it new? Keep going. There, right there.
Yeah, we've seen these appear around for a little while now. It looks like it's meant for a jig. You could probably put all your tooling and hoses through on one end, but we're still not quite certain what this exactly is for. So uh, you've got Y, you've got Z. So these are the directions for coordinates. It's just a question of like this isn't 9 meters. What are you doing with this? Is this for pucks, for boosters? Uh, just kind of opened up, that question. It might be that you have other smaller stuff inside, but it could be for the puck, locks tank, a lot of other things. But it's just a station of one of many potentially, and you'd have this in Star Factory. Yeah, I usually have an order to my madness, but I've been going mad all over the place, so I apologize about that. See if I can be a bit more consistent here. Um, So let's see. I talked a little bit about the Mega Bay foundations. It's pretty much already done. Um, as of the ground shots, you could see that this side was finished. The concrete's already there. The formwork is actually being removed. So this is actually going to be appearing very quickly. You should see again these columns standing vertically around the Mega Bay, or this new Mega Bay very soon. So you've got these embeds that they'll connect to directly. So this connects to that pretty much, or something similar to it. Actually, I'm not seeing the holes on this one. That actually is weird. Never mind. Oh wait, there are holes. I can see it now. It's just between the pixels.
Well, the problem is the plate is so thick you don't see a shadow through it.
Yeah, or light coming through, exactly. But I can barely see it now. But yeah, those are the holes for the embeds. It's just like, wait a second, something's different here. Looks very flat, but it's got some holes. I figured out what this name of this extension building is called. It's called the Star Factory Backpack Building, or expansion. Sorry, backpack expansion was the term that was used. So I looked up some documents that were public documents to describe this, and that was it. And then the square footage they had it as described would basically go from here to all the way out over here. So square footage was wrong, really wrong. Um, But we do have, a little bit more on the other side of Star Factory. It's kind of one of my favorite little areas to talk about and think about. Let me see if I've got the nice zoomed in shots here. So this is the Star Factory foundation that they're basically going up to this point over here. You can see these little markers. And what you can't quite make out here is there are pink boxes in between each of these. I've got some other photos that show it, but might as well just show you the outline I made to describe how big this building is based off of these markers, and I'm pretty sure it goes up to here based off of what they did on this Star Factory. It could even go bigger, depending on, is this alleyway right here going to be left open, or are they going to go all the way to here and connect the two buildings, like basically just butt them up against each other. So you have one wall that is two buildings, or maybe you still put up a sheet metal for this wall, but it's going to be interesting because you've got the second phase of Star Factory being built here. So this would be phase 1, this would be phase 2, and the sizes, I don't have the comparison of the two directly, but I could show you, I guess, a zoomed out shot again. Right here. So we're looking at it going all the way to here because that's where the markers are at. So it's pretty much over double the size of this current Star Factory. They have this area right here, which is called a press pit. And I do have a little bit more on that here. So this is a great little piece on what the press pits will look like for construction. So this company specifically builds these. And wow, that quality is still pretty terrible. And I'll just scrub through it a little bit here, just to show the stages that they will look at. So right now we already have the foundation work going into place. So we should see rebar appearing shortly after that. So they've just got formwork going in, and then they'll do concrete and such, and then eventually you'll have equipment installed. And this is an example of some press parts that are being made, but there was a specific one I was looking at here. Where was that? Right in here. So this is not exactly the machine we're looking at. It's just something similar to what we could be looking at. So you'll have basically steel coming in on the right side, and then it basically is pressed into individual parts, and then those parts have additional presses for each section it goes into. So you have an input and output of your process. So the output is over here on the left-hand side, and so you can see that basically parts are stamped and go from the right to the left. So each section has additional elements that it's doing to basically correct or change the part. So additional holes or the direction it's basically stamping other areas. But yeah, it's a really similar process that we should have here. I'm thinking that we will have at least, for one sense, stringers. That's one they make a lot of, or need a lot of, so they'll probably be making them here. And then you can also change out those dies to allow you to do other stamps, and you have to basically set up all the machining and everything else to do that. And it gets expensive, but if you do large runs of one material and then go to another, you'll have a really vertically integrated facility. And then the other section I'm thinking for the rest of this, besides the press pit and stamping area that they have, I'm thinking that a lot of tents 1 and 2 will be going up into here. So that was like what we talked about with the argon tank that was sitting over here over at Sanchez. It was from tent 1, and I'm not seeing it on the flyover, so I'm thinking it's coming from the inside of tent 1. So they're pretty much done with tent 1 on the inside, or at least for argon, meaning they're probably wrapping up, and we'll start to see more stuff coming out hopefully soon. So we will then start to see these be pulled down. But it doesn't quite fit with the timeline. This building's going to still take a little while to get there. So fingers crossed on that one. But at least that's the first beginning part. So a lot of what goes in tent 1 and 2, I was talking with Jax about this the other day. Tent 1 is basically a lot of, they're all fit and finish, really. But I think tent 2 was mostly booster parts, and then they will go through, do piping, valve assemblies, everything else that you would like to have done prior to stacking. They'll get most of that done. So it's just a lot of the forward domes, aft domes for boosters, I think, up here, and ships down here. But it's just fit and finish. That's pretty much about it. Was there any other questions or any areas that we should hit up? Because I'm blanking out on any other areas to talk about at the moment on the build site.
I think we've got the build site pretty well covered. Probably time to go to the village.
Before we do, there are questions. Mauricio, did you want to ask them?
Well, there was a few questions. Let's see. The first question is from Smurf Trooper. Do you know what happened to the solar cells we assumed to be put on top of the Star Factory, the ones that were between, I believe, 2 and 3, or 3 and Star Factory? I don't know where they were at.
Well, that's a good point. So there was quite a bit of that material, I believe, up in here at one point, or maybe it was somewhere else, and I just misremember it. Maybe it was in here, but it's since been moved somewhere else. I don't know where it went. One big change, though, that has occurred is right here. So they are taking down these solar panels off of the shipping container wall. And actually, that was probably a good one to look at as well. That's why I should use the pictures as the guide, typically. Here we go. This is it. So this is what we'd be looking at as the solar panels being removed off the shipping container wall. If I remember right, it was a row of, let's see, for each container, it was like 42 solar panels, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right. We were all amazed by the 42. That was the first time we'd seen him start using that 42 number.
Yeah, it was like 7 this way and then 6 this way.
And the building is orange because of... whatever was broken, perhaps?
What do you mean? Orange right here is
No,
is
no.
just the lighting
Yeah. So if you look at the container itself, right below where the yeah.
I think that's just sunset.
Oh, okay.
and rust. So this is a metal grate. You can see it's got rust and it's got that nice patina, but sunset makes it help it look a little bit more golden as well.
Or in this case, it was sunrise. It was around 9 a.m.
Oh, good point.
Okay,
The shadow's coming from the east.
sun low in the sky. How's that?
Oh, that's right. We did have some big news. I just skipped over, but Ship 29, they've been going through and stacking that one like crazy. So I'm pretty excited to see, where we will be at within what 2 weeks. They'll probably get this pretty much all stacked up. Everything else is, I think, assembled, not assembled, but pre assembled outside, waiting for stacking. I was excited to see these images, but the thing that I was looking for, and that is that manifold that we talked about that should be at Sanchez that came here, or we believe that came here, it won't be visible based off of the fact that you've got a nice big wall right here. The fence is preventing us from seeing the, what was it, 5 foot height that those are. So even if they are inside being painted or something, even if they're visible on this side, they won't be visible because of the fence. So SpaceX and their privacy walls, shipping containers, actual fences, those are all in that same realm. Speaking of which, they seem to be moving a lot of these shipping containers around. Jax was talking about that yesterday. Dave, where do you know the shipping containers have been going? Do you know on that?
I don't know. I just know it looks like they're deconstructing the left side of this container wall.
Maybe it has something to do with a new launch table or something. That would be kind of cool.
Might be that. Might be preparation for relocating everything here in terms of Star Factory enlargement.
Yeah, the issue with the Star Factory enlargement is they've got like this going outside of the footprint, at least what Roberts Road has. So Roberts Road would have basically said ends here. This one continues all the way up to about here. So it's extremely large. And then they would have normally brought it going down this way. And they could still actually do this entire size all the way down to here and all the way to here to here. So this will be just one massive giant building that will be known as Star Factory. And then the crazy part here is that they would take down, of course, the windbreak, which it has some use, but it's not very useful. And then the GSE building. But in turn, they're getting a much better facility for the employees here. Like they'll have air conditioning, and this one's hot and miserable, and you have to leave the doors open just to get the wind. But yeah, this Novus Prime Realty's parcel right here is probably a headache in that whole design because, unless the reason why they brought the Star Factory out this way, they're like, well, we're going to bring it out this way, and then we're going to go this way. Just barely, avoiding this parcel because for whatever reason they don't have access to purchase that, or maybe the owner is just asking too much, because I know this one, they're asking too much. It's a bit high. They can actually ask a little bit lower, and SpaceX would probably say, okay.
Yeah,
but once you lower it, it's going to be, that's
it's
it.
supply and demand, my friend. If they want it that badly, they'll pay that price. So that individual's going to mint money.
Well, it could be just like the house in Up. It was based off a real house that this lady lived in next to a shopping mall that they were building, and they built just around it. And then they eventually a worker who he basically took care of her. She gave him the house because she had nobody else to give it to. But he basically came in and took care of her each day. But anyways, it's just kind of reminds me of that. There's no house here, but it's just that little parcel that's left.
Well, and in theory, in Up, it was next like a Walmart, right? A big mega store. This is next to a launch site, pretty much. They're building rockets here.
Yeah.
I don't know it would be that bad. And SpaceX is going to pay the money, not an individual.
I don't even know what they would try to use it as at this point for the individual. It's fairly landlocked. They would need access to it, so there's should be some sort of easement. But you're not going to build a house here. I mean, this is the worst place to do it. So, anyways, it's just a weird thought on that one.
Yeah, especially that area with 24/7 heavy metal manufacturing from the GSE building.
Yeah, so I mean, Maria Pointer, she used to live right here. This was her house. She was a good distance away from everything here, but there would be issues with lighting, and SpaceX was accommodating on that once they knew that that was an issue. That lights were basically just pointed directly at her house, and even with the blinds down, it was like daylight inside or something crazy. But the end result was that her and Ray they sold their property, and I think they've lived over there. What was it like 20 years? So this was going to be the retirement location, and things kind of changed. But yeah, it's very disruptive, I think, to have a factory built here. One thing I did hear from Maria just recently, which was really good news, is there's a lot more families moving in. There's SpaceX families, but a lot more families. So this is becoming more of a community once again. It's a it's a was it corporate town is what they call them, but it looks pretty good. They've got a lot more homes being developed. So I guess we can start to get into that. Was there any questions or donations we want to go through before we move forward into the village?
There is one donation. It came from Paul H., who donated $12.05 and says, "Money for the flyover. Keep up the good work." And that's it for the donations for now.
Thank you, Paul.
Do have one question that just came through at 14, Jared. I was told I'm not allowed to fly a drone near Starbase. How do you guys get away with it? We use an airplane. We've been using a Cessna 172 for these flyovers, so we fly above the TFR. Over the TFR.
Yeah, the TFR is at 10,000. You're flying at 10,500, correct?
Right, around that area. So we always leave a good buffer zone to stay out of the airspace that's restricted.
And does the TFR cover the build site? There was a question in the chat from Andy.
I think it covers partial of the build site. We might need to, but even then, like we wouldn't fly, even if it didn't cover the build site, it's really sketchy to be flying that close to the build site with an airplane, knowing that the TFR is within a few hundred feet from
Yeah.
area of the. So yeah, it's pretty. We always follow the rules and regulations associated with the FAA.
Actually, this is a good quick area to look at. So I think it's from technically like this part of Sanchez all the way over to the launch site, plus some more over the ocean, right, for the TFR, and then it basically encompasses that whole area. And so like you do see planes like right here, you're flying lower than the TFR, but you're getting up higher and higher to go up above the TFR. But yeah, you're looking at this location here. I've seen planes that are flying around the canal, probably 1,000, 2,000 feet up. They'll look at these two sites and locations, and there'll be some interesting shots because it's like very weird perspective because we like to see up above, and they're looking at it from a low vantage point, but it's from very far away. But yeah, let's jump over to the village real quick. So the puck that we were talking about that was right here now is over at Sanchez. So it's getting scrapped, which is good riddance because this is really weird to see all of this junk just kind of sitting here for all this time. They've got a lot of cable that they're starting to pull away from here. At least I'd say 4 of these spools are gone now. From the last time this image was taken, at least. We had a kind of interesting question about this, these being the model homes that they might be using to show, like, here's what we can have that we're going to build elsewhere on the site, but it does appear they've got sewer and electric. So I'm not sure if that's the case anymore. I think it actually is a usable little village of homes. But they're all kind of unique. That was the interesting part. Like each one, the way the porch is, the way the layout seemed to be indicating, we're all different. So
Do you think that they are part of the actual, like, where they have all the inventory stuff? Just behind it and to the right of it, or left of it, sorry?
yeah, they're two separate locations. This was United Rentals that was using this spot. Now they're over at Sanchez.
Right. But do you think that they're actually model homes, or do you think that they are used for, like, those things that they are
Oh,
inventory?
this is for people, based off of like what they're putting in over here, and everything else. It's got porches. This is meant for human habitation.
Yeah, it's small home housing for bigger than the Airstream, smaller than the modular houses.
I do wonder if it's like we've got somebody coming in that's an executive. This is their place to be. That's the equivalent of a hotel, and that's not an Airstream, but it's also not one of these larger homes.
Yeah, because
That kind of thinking.
where are the actual homes that they are the models for?
Yeah, good point. It's unless they were going to be putting them in here, and that was kind of what I thought before, because they started this little trailer park over here. They're not trailers, but like I guess they're mobile homes, but they had the Airstream Park over here, and I thought they might be starting to fill in this area with these kinds of buildings. But it sounds like they're no longer going for the mobile homes or the trailers. They're pretty much done with that, and they're going to continue building actual homes. So this might have been an in-between moment or something else. So it could be, again, like for executives coming in, this is where they stay for period of days before a launch or during audits or whatever that they're doing at the site. That could be where they're staying instead of going to Brownsville to a hotel, which is still a good 40-minute drive at least sometimes, depending on traffic and the potholes. That'll really get you there. It used to be that you could drive there, about 15, 20 minutes from some parts of Brownsville, but the Highway 4 area is just pretty bad. We heard, let's see, Lab has lost 2 tires. We were talking about somebody yesterday. Who was that again?
Ezekiel Overstreet.
Ezekiel Overstreet. Yeah, he's lost 3 tires within
3 tires launch week on 3 different incidents.
A launch week. Wow. Yeah, that's terrible. So Highway 4 is pretty brutal.
It was terrible. The potholes were the worst I've seen them. Right before the construction area where they were completely repaving it were the very worst of them.
Yeah, I've heard that that it is being funded. I think it's probably by SpaceX, but it's privately funded for the Highway 4 because technically Texas hasn't put any money towards doing the maintenance on that road, and it does make sense that SpaceX is the one using it the most. They're doing the most harm because of all the construction and everything else. That they should be the ones who basically help maintain that road. And I think the next maintenance cycle for it is another 10 years for Texas. So that's when they would basically come in and pay for replacements and additional repairs of the road. But now I think they're ahead of the curve with SpaceX coming in and really just replacing large segments. They've replaced pretty much everything from Sanchez all the way down to the launch site, plus the large sections already there, ongoing construction in between.
Yeah, well, it was interesting. Between the launch attempt that became a wet dress and the actual launch, I was on Route 4 west of the construction area by Massey's. And all of a sudden, like one day, they did about 1.5 miles of pothole filling. And it was a county road crew. I mean, it was a Cameron County marked vehicles out there for the whole day, and they filled in probably 50 potholes. It was insane. Like there was going to be something going on that they needed to have the road look good for the next couple of days for the launch or something. But the one area right by the beginning of the construction site was still terrible. That was like, oh, that's 100 yards past our work area. We're not going to fix that.
Yeah, I know that from what I was looking at, that SpaceX or privately was being funded, so probably SpaceX or something along those lines was taking care of that, but it was going towards basically the county, the construction workers. It was all being done the normal way that you normally would. It's just the funding mechanism was a bit different. Um, well, getting back to the village and what's going on over at the integration site, so more homes and integration site is looking pretty lean. It's getting less material, so we've already removed the work platform. So this one is the Raptor lift stand. Bart was over here before as well.
It's right there.
Where?
Dead center.
Oh,
Bottom of
there
the
it is.
frame.
Yeah, there it is. So Bart and this are back up the launch site.
And one of those white tank stacks has also been transported back to the launch site.
Oh, the high pressure gas canisters. Nice. I didn't know about that one.
I don't know about any more, but I know one for sure was caught headed down Route 4.
Sneaky, sneaky.
Tom is out a question from
Yeah.
Eagle Chuck. Where do they land the hovercraft? Can you show the pad there?
Yeah, let me go back to this image here. So this is where the hovercraft is at. That's the smaller one. That's their little parking spot, but this is the parking spot for the large one. And what's really cool, I think we saw it in one of the images, and I'll actually go to that really quickly here. We can actually see the hovercraft in action. So Mauricio got it right then and there. So
Great
there's
timing.
Yeah. So there's the little truck with somebody pulling up. It looked like kayaks, at least 2 kayaks here. So it looks like they're using this little road here. That's the access to get to this back bay. Or South Bay. I'm not sure if it's South Bay or Back Bay, but this all used to be the Laguna Madre beforehand, before they put in the canal and everything else. But anyways, it's really cool. You got to see the hovercraft in action there. They should be traveling over this way, and then I think it was traveling around this way. But it's kind of interesting that they're kind of going out and around. But maybe it's because of the private property parcels over here. No, they would be over here. No, that doesn't make any sense. So
Yeah, there's more private property on the opposite side too.
yeah, let me see if I can go back up to where I was just at with the this little site here. There wasn't much else as far as news here, but that was just kind of a cool little spot. Was there any other questions from Chuck or anybody else?
That's it. There was another question. You could go back to it if you want. So the question is from Crane Man. Could those corroded table frames be fit the small pipes and the deluge pipe to one of the plates like a jig to compensate for the difference in height between deluge pipe and plate? He's talking about the water cooled steel plates, I believe, back in San.
Yeah. So
that
he's
one.
talking about specifically these being connected to these and these. So yes, these could be to support it underneath, but you would want a lot more than just this, because the foundation, these 6 feet, would be easily compressed. So you'd have to have concrete below that that would hold all of this up. And you'd actually want it, instead of being feet, you want it to be flat. So you would maybe shim it in places, and then you would fill it with additional leveling grout. But the other issue is this is not a lot of structure to support this plate, which is supporting the thrust from the 7,500 tons of thrust that you'll see over the entire area that is going to be impinged by flames.
Just a comment. I did see a picture of one of those 2 frames headed towards the launch site.
Interesting.
They are much taller than they look.
Oh yeah, these are pretty tall. So
they're over 6 foot tall.
Yeah, so here's an 8-foot shipping container from this corner to this top part. That's 8.5 feet. So yeah, you're looking at a pretty good 6 feet plus.
Yeah. Yeah, they are much heavier than they look in these. Without good size comparisons, they are much heavier than they look.
Yeah, but it will be interesting to see where they end up, and we can actually talk about those because I mean, this is pretty much the same stuff we're thinking about as water deluge, and that's one of the directions we're going to be going towards here on the launch site. So, any other questions or comments or donations that we wanted to go for before you hit the launch site?
That's it. We can move on. As far as question goes, we don't have anything, so we can move on.
Awesome. Well, I'll just jump right to it, and I guess we can go. Let's see here, probably to the big item on here, because we're already mentioning it. I'll just go for it. Usually, I like to hold off for closer to the end, but the good news is on the launch table side, as well as I think Elon calls it a launch ring, but this entire structure is getting a lot of work done, at least at the foundations level. So let me go to a little bit better angle on here, I think. Perfect. Okay, so from this angle, you can actually see they've got some rope. They've tied it around the rebar so it's nice and pulled together so it's not dangling. And then they have skid steers that they've been bringing underneath to remove a lot of this material. And the big stuff that they need to get rid of is these little columns. They've got like at least 26 of them, and there's a single rebar coming through. These would probably be friction piles. Would be a good description of how these should work. So they basically spread out the load. They basically grab onto soil and other stuff, and they don't go down too far, but it was probably, 30-40 feet. We now have a good sign that they're going for, instead of like these 2.5 to 3 foot diameter piles, they're going for 5. They're really going full bore on this. So we're going to see some good news coming up soon. I don't think we have any pictures of that yet, unless you have it in here, actually, that you sent me earlier. There we go. That's
Well,
good.
actually, that's not near the tower. That is sitting over by the big square of dirt.
Oh, well, that's big news.
Interestingly enough, yes. So we have a auger pile auger and 3 or 4 water and mud separation tanks to go with it.
Yeah,
They're red.
they're
Yeah, they're
called
yellow.
frac tanks, FRACK.
Well, yeah, they're different. They're different ones. There's some that are water, some of them that are segmented and are mud separation, open top. Very similar to what we saw when they were putting the pilings in for the OLIT.
Well, this is huge news because we're kind of moving over to the other side here to look at that. Um, but the this little spot where we've got this square pad, we looked at this as, well, they're going to put something here. We don't know what. It wasn't going to be an integration tower or table or anything like that. It just quite doesn't fit the way that they built this. They built it at 39A. Same thing with this. But they put dirt here. It kind of squeezes out the water, which is good. You want to slowly do that, and by putting a heavy weight like dirt like this on top, it will do that. But you're now saying they've got the auger over here, which I was expecting to be going over here.
So see where the sort of muddy spot is above it?
So it's in this location then.
No, to the right, where the
Okay.
wheel tracks are. Where the wheel tracks are.
This one right here then.
Right in that area, I think, is where it's generally in that area. It can move a bit, but that looks like sort of where they're setting up the tanks and stuff. This is where we're going to need a certain pilot to fly over and take some more pictures as soon as the weather improves.
Speaking of which, Mauricio, do you have any hints on when you might next have your flyover? Because weather is dependent, you're heavily dependent on weather. But any ideas what time you're looking at next week?
I don't have a date yet, but we will be posting it in Patreon Lounge for the members, and yeah, that's usually the only place I announce the flyover dates and all that, just because it's not really guaranteed.
Okay. Well, do you have at least multiple dates that you're booking yet this week for that flyover, or
We're
are you
trying
just
to
looking at?
do it. Yeah, we're trying to do it tomorrow. But still checking on the availability on the aircraft and backup dates Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday.
Okay. Well,
Hopefully,
that's good news that like as long as one of those dates works out, fingers crossed. But good luck. We're all counting on you. No pressure, of course. It's always amazing to see these pictures on the flyover each week. Uh, Anytime that you're able to provide these, really, because we get these massive updates of what's going on. Because you can see, like, oh, they cleaned up all the concrete in here, but they can't really clean it up in the mud flats. If they try to, they'll do a lot more damage. For instance, to the loma or whatever that is called. But basically, it compresses it. There's actual organic growing material inside the mud flats that the what was it called? The piping plover actually likes to eat. And it will be interesting to see what happens with these depressions, if that's beneficial or not beneficial for some of the other organics that will grow in here as well. So this is pretty, what's it called? Briny soil and water. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. But yeah, getting back to the, basically the launch mount, the exciting news is they are still, as I said, removing a lot of materials. They have removed the doghouse. Um, so again, let me scroll through some of these pretty quick. There we go. So there is what is left underneath the doghouse, and those raptors lifted up a lot of dirt on the inside. So they used to have these I-beams right here, right up against the ground. Um, and I think these are kind of like studs or something like that that would go into the concrete to hold everything in place. The concrete gave way before the rest of this. And I think the was it this pipe or this one? I can't remember now which one it was, but it was one of the green pipes was a water pipe, and it seemed to be leaking everywhere because it looked like it got damaged. But they might need to replace some of this pipe work. They will have to replace the doghouse that was attached to here, but it might not quite fit so properly now because of the damage on the bottom sections over here, especially. Things kind of pulled and ripped and torqued it. And there's also some damage here to this pipe. I'm not sure if this is fiber or if this was a pole line or what this was in the conduit, but it obviously has got something hanging out of it that's yellow and doesn't look too good. So there's a person in here for the sense of scale. What do you think that might be, Dave?
I don't know. It looked like just a piece of conduit with probably cable in it, not pole line.
Like thinking Ethernet or just copper wiring?
Yeah, hard to say. Looks probably just like copper wiring.
Okay. But yeah, I can see it's a little bit more dense up here and just nothing down here, so I think it got ripped.
Well, it also looks like it holds a bend, which most Ethernet cable wouldn't.
Well, not at this point, anyways. Yeah, the infrastructure here, I think, got damaged a little bit more than Elon lets up to say, but it's not too terrible. You could still repair it. It's just going to take a little bit of time, and I think it's a little bit longer than what Elon says, but that's just me. Elon has his own Elon time, which is right now is actually, according to what I've heard, ahead of schedule on some of this construction and fixing of the stabilization of the soil here. So the actual columns, let me go back to the flyover picture. These are, if I remember right, about 140 feet deep underground. So they seem to be weathering pretty well through that entire storm of concrete. So didn't seem to be too many issues there. But we talked about this water tank that will be potentially here. And so if there's a bunch of augers going in to basically make some nice big pits for foundation columns, I'm hoping we get a water tank similar to what we had at 39A, and it gets attached to the rest of this. What you would see is basically a water tank here. There would be a single line that comes out in this direction, and then there would be a line that would go connect to the what is that called? A manifold. That's the one that's missing that we believe is at the GSE building. And then these white high pressure gas canisters are basically part of the pressurization of these tanks right now. But in the future, for a water tank, I'm wondering if it would be more gravity driven or if they'll use the pressure from these as well. If they'll hook it up the other way or how they'll do that. And then these would basically become water hammer tanks. So you don't want lots of pressure suddenly increasing or decreasing. This will help remove some of that. And then the compressible gas, that would help as well. And then there's going to be a two-stage system. We know that that's going to happen based off these two pipes. 2 stages means there's going to be as Elon described it, a shower head at the bottom. So it's going to be all aimed up, not too high, hopefully, at the engines, because if you hit the engines, you could actually freeze the water directly onto the engine bell itself, which would be kind of bad and damaging to have stuff suddenly go from a volume size of 1 to 1,000 times that when you light it up, because that'll turn it right into steam. Steam expands to be 1,000 times its volume. But anyways, that's one of those issues that you don't want to have. So this basically would be an interesting water fountain below.
So I just saw a question in chat, and it actually pertains to right where we're at. Little out of sequence, but we didn't really show all of the plates at Sanchez. So if we might pop back real quick at Sanchez and show the aerial of both the rectangle and the trapezoidal plates. They haven't moved in a while, but at least so people know what we're talking about.
Sure. We have a lot of them that are missing. So there are these pieces right here. I went through and did measurements on a bunch of this, and now I forget for the life of me of what the measurements were. I'd have to look them up real quick. We're pretty consistent for like the width and depth, and then this was like half of it. So I think this was 8 feet here, or maybe it was 7. I think it was 8, and then this was 4. Yeah, sounds about right. But yeah,
that looks pretty close. Looking at the 6 foot wide pickup, I'd say that's pretty close. Or the 8 foot wide container.
Yep. So this is 8 feet wide, and that's part of how I measure things is shipping containers and literal container walls, which I know 7 panels this way is exactly 40 feet. So I count like 21 panels. So I get 3 shipping containers at 120 feet, for instance. Is that right? Yeah. Sorry, I just have to do the math in my head real quick because I'm also looking up some stuff on my measurements. Okay, so there we go. Found it. So the diagonals I was measuring was for the not the diagonals, the width. I was getting about 18.2 feet ish, maybe 18.3, something around there. And then I was getting that this gap right here was a 1 foot gap, which is kind of interesting because we have those steel plates like this, which are going to be 2 feet on the steel plates that I've measured. This one actually is a really weird angle, so it's not looking directly above, so you get a little bit more of a gap here. Though there's a good height distance, you can actually see the pieces connect together. But these are the shower head, the metal sandwich, the water-cooled steel plates that Elon has talked about. So it's really important to note, like, that's what we're intending to use, or SpaceX is intending to use at the launch mount. And these are part of that distribution system. So the water comes in, goes into these plates, and we are missing a lot more of these trapezoid shapes. So there should be 6 of these. And right now there's only 1. I suspect that the rest are probably at the inventory tent where they did a lot of the manufacturing and welding for these. So it's kind of interesting. We haven't seen any more evidence of those at the inventory tent. Even though we've got pass-bys, they'll have like welding shields up and stuff previously when we've looked for it. But yeah, so all of that stuff goes right in here, just underneath this, and then it would probably extend out a ways too, as far as the steel plates. I'm not sure if they'd be water cooled out here, but I'm pretty sure that they will extend steel plates beyond the current area, so it'll all be connected together as far as tension, and they'll probably even use concrete to help keep it down and be welded together with the other plates. And then Elon has even mentioned that they will be under tension and compression. So underneath, that'll be the compression that they'll be pushing up against the concrete, metals, and soils. But the top side is really where it matters, is the tension. So steel does really good under tension. It'll be at these points of the legs, and that's going to be nice because it won't be able to break free. It'll be able to hold on. So think of a steel rope. It's just like a 1-inch cable holds an entire booster and all of its 250 tons of area. So like that's a 1-inch steel cable right there. You can see just barely parts of each one. There's actually like 8 lines right here for each one being a 1-inch steel cable.
10.
10? Oh, that's right.
It's 10 to 1. It's 10 to 1.
I stand corrected. Anyways, it's pretty amazing how much weight a single cable can carry, and you're looking at it under tension in that load. Where compression, you have to actually have a lot more steel, and in this case, the obvious solution for compression is not steel, it's concrete. So each of these legs, they have concrete poured in them. And I was looking for holes that they had like drilled to test the concrete inside, and I saw this one. I was like, oh wow, they've got a hole. Wait, that's old. That's the very center of the leg. When they did the original pour, they poured it all the way up to this halfway point, stopped, and then left it from here to here without concrete for probably say 6 months. It was pretty interesting. They completely changed their designs on how they wanted these legs and the launch mount above it. So the legs stayed, and then they went through, cut off the top to level them off, and then they poured up to this point in concrete. And then eventually at the very end, they did pour concrete from here to here, just like weeks prior to the launch. They're like, oh, this is another thing on the launch checklist that we need to do is fill in this area for concrete. But as far as the launches go, the things that seem to last really well are stainless steel like these. Mild steel gets corroded and rusted afterwards because it strips off the paint. So like this is the backside where the paint still exists, and this shows even better because it's patchy paint at that point. It must have flaked off a little bit. But the inside legs, they're just gone. There's no paint. I wish they actually had some sort of stainless steel wraps instead of just regular mild steel. But I guess it's expensive. And you also do want to see what's behind it. So if these are corroded out, you want to know that your steel columns are still functional. Otherwise, you have some issues. But yeah, just my 2 cents worth. I wish they had steel plates just aimed in with water deluge that would basically aim in, and it would basically destabilize the that flame front. That's the supersonic flames that are not supersonic. I don't think they're supersonic. I think they're just slightly under. Anyways, they would basically allow the engines to not damage themselves, basically, especially at that startup sequence. That's the hardest part. You have the initial overpressurization event. That's when your engine lights up, the sound energy goes basically down and then back up. The only thing that's really saving them here is that height of the launch table. It removes quite a bit of energy just because of the inverse square law. So here's a quick example of the height. So this is about 20 meters up to here from the base, or where the base should be. This is where the concrete should be at. Things kind of changed dramatically here.
Something else to comment on while we're looking at it here, dead center, is they've removed all of the access plates to that protection on the cryopiping. And it looks like they had to grind the bolt heads off on every one of them.
Yeah, I've got some better shots of that here where you can see the bolt heads just kind of missing or have some weird issues. And yeah, we did see an angle grinder going on at the time at these locations, so that's most likely where it was at. This one's kind of a little bit, has a little bit of motion blur. Oh, this one's perfect. But yeah, there was angle grinding going off all of the other day just to get all this basically done for these plates. And speaking of putting stainless steel on plates, this is probably what you get, a veneer like what Hoppy has. So this is 12 millimeter or 12 and a half millimeter stainless steel, and then they put on this veneer, and the veneer is like 0.1 millimeter, so it really can't take a hit.
You do get a good indication of the hailstorm of concrete that went Hoppy's way.
Well, Hoppy just got a little bit sunburnt, and it's peeling now. Or maybe raptor burn is a better way to describe it. But the concrete, yeah, that's the thing that really did it. And the blast wave just comes along and puts pressure underneath and just picks this all up. There's enough gases there. The cameras seem to take it pretty well. So these are some of the best views that you have of launch from or landing of starships when they used to land here. And their drone radar system kind of took a hit.
Those cameras took it pretty well. Don't look at the tank farm cameras.
I think I will, because that one is pretty funny. Just the way they're awkwardly kind of dressed. Where was that? I guess it's at the end.
I think it's further down.
So I don't have these quite in sections. I usually would have it that way. Stop me when you see it.
Right there.
Perfect.
That picture.
Yeah. The cameras are checking out the pipe, the conduit specifically.
What was a conduit? It's now a piece of functional sculpture, I think.
Modern art? Oh, okay.
Let's just say the unistrut supports for that pipe and those boxes didn't do its job.
Yeah, it's looking pretty terrible. Even this AC unit, or part of the cooling unit that's over here, the side's been removed, the top has been removed. It's
well, look at the fan shroud on the right. That one.
Yeah, I don't see most of the fan shroud. It's just kind of
but
impacted.
it's sort of dented. It's dented in. I think a large piece of concrete landed on top of that.
Yeah, I don't see it. It's just missing or pushed in. I can see the other side just fine. Wow. So that's going to be some either work or replacement, depending on how bad the damage is. But if it hit the blades, you have to replace them.
The good news is those top shrouds and even the motors and the blades. You look on the ground, the whole blade and motor assembly is sitting there for one of them. Those are all modular and easily replaceable by your local HVAC company.
But yeah, the launch did a lot more damage than a lot of people suspect. Even at this point, even though Elon's like it looks fine. Well, it's fine, but you're gonna have to replace a bunch of it. Luckily, most of the stuff that's damaged is ground level.
Well, I see we have two of the kettle boiler vent doors stuck open.
Yeah, the blast didn't take care of that. They're always stuck open. They're kind of rusted open.
Yeah.
You would hope that that the launch would be like, okay, we're gonna close now. Nope, they're defiant to the end. But we did have some good news, and it kind of works in a positive direction. Of course, is they've been putting on the steel plate right here. which is either indicating that the hole on the inside that we suspect is there isn't actually there, or if there is, that they just go through and cut into this plate as a reinforcement so that they can access in the inside without worrying too much about the safety side of things, and then basically protect themselves against perlite, and then take all of that out to access a potential hole that's there. The reason why we really still think there's a hole right there is that it was just billowing lots of condensate out of this hole continuously, which would indicate that liquid oxygen was being liberated and released. And then we did see them empty out the tank completely. I do wonder if they're just like, well, if we patch over the hole and it has the leak, I mean, what would be the damage here if they did fill up the LOX tank, Dave, in your opinion?
That would be a safety hazard, but I wonder if they actually drained it. It does have a manhole in the bottom. They could have, knowing SpaceX, they could have gone in and scaffolded up the inside and done an inside patch at the same time.
Well, from what I remember is that they, unless they put up a bulkhead, let me see if I've got a good image of these. Here we go. So these have a decent spot to look at. So these are 12.2 meters in diameter, and then the inner tank is a 9-meter tank with a concrete pedestal. So I think this is the LOX tank on the left, and this is the nitrogen tank just to the right. So this is similar to the one that's in the back. So they've got a manhole that you can access down here. Do you think it's not covered in perlite that you can actually access into the underside of the inner tank?
I was wondering that. I think they may have actually blocked it so that you could get to the inner manhole. That was something we were questioning back when they were getting ready to put the perlite in, is how they were doing that, because for a long time they had those manholes open and they were working on the annular space. So maybe they did put some protection in there so you can get into the inner tank for service.
Well, how would you basically block the perlite from getting from the top end to the bottom end? The perlite weighs something, right?
Right. So you'd probably have to put a ceiling, basically a covered section around the space between the two manholes.
What kind of material would you suspect they would use to do that?
Probably just steel, welded to the walls, just like everything else.
Yeah, the issue with steel, I'm just thinking about it, is it's fairly large, bulky, and you wouldn't be able to easily get it through that manhole. You'd have to have it in small, tiny segments to do that.
Oh, you mean like a downcomer?
Yes, but downcomer on steroids.
Well, but I mean, I'm seriously, you could literally take in, 2 foot wide pieces, and probably nest them so that, because one of the things I was just thinking about is the outer tank's gonna, move a little bit with the heat of the day. The inner tank's obviously gonna shrink a bunch when it gets.
Sounds like Starlink is changing over for you here. But yeah, the outside tank is going to expand and contract, and the inner tank should be fairly solid there. It doesn't move around. Do we have you back, Dave? Or did I die? Indian Star, am I still live here?
Us. No, you're with us. Trust and believe that.
All right, good. So I'll move Dave out and back in. Maybe that'll help.
I'll take care
Dave.
of it. You go ahead. And...
Dave, are you still with us?
There he is.
Back.
All right.
And transfer tube is correct.
Yep. So I'm hoping that Dave is right, that they do have a easy access to there. We just didn't see what they were doing. You don't see anything on the outside because it shouldn't be that much heat to weld material like that from one side to the other. And then you just put in some brackets with it so that it has some rigidity and structure, because the distance between 12.4 meters and 9 meters is still going to be, that half of that, which would be 3.4 divided by half would be 1.7.
And tell us, for those who don't know, do you want to explain what perlite is, or remind everybody what perlite is?
Dave, you want to take that?
Perlite is a very common volcanic rock, usually white in color, that is used for many things. If you have potting soil, The little white beads in the potting soil are not styrofoam; they are perlite because it retains water.
Oh, I
But
never knew that. Wow.
and if you take perlite that is moist, which it normally is because it's out in the air, and you heat it up really hot, it pops like popcorn and swells up and becomes very lightweight and becomes a great insulator. So it's very commonly used as an insulator between the walls of cryogenic tanks.
And then a quick another way to look at it, like the 1.7 meter distance is 5.5 feet. So 5.5 feet is the distance between the outer wall and the inner wall that you'll have to transverse. So they'll be pretty long 2-foot panels if that's what they used, and whatever they did,
Well, my thought is
I'm hoping they did.
if they're only like 3 feet long and you have one set of them connected to the outer wall and one set connected to the inner wall overlapping, that allows movement. Because as I was saying, as Discord died, the inner tank's going to move when it gets filled with cryo because it's going to shrink. So you can't have a rigid connection between the inner and the outer tank. So you have to allow for a sliding joint of some sort.
Yeah, that's a good point. I was thinking they were going to put it up along the concrete. So you weld it to the outside tank and then basically just let it sit and rest on the inside lip of the concrete pedestal. So you have to use a little bit of a ladder and a little bit of scaffolding to get up there. But it would still be useful to be able to sit up here, go weld it from this side, and let it rest on the inside. It can move back and forth, several inches and be fine.
Yeah, you just need it. You just need it to be a sliding joint that won't let perlite migrate through it.
And if it does, it's just very little.
Yeah.
Because the last thing you want is opening it up and perlite just flying out. Oh my goodness.
Well, one thing we did discover when we were looking at the companies, and I can't remember who that was that blew the perlite in, is they also do provide the service for your cryogenic tank operators for removing the perlite specifically to be able to service a tank.
I wonder if they just use lots of trash bags. What is it they do?
I would
Semi trucks
assume they
full
do.
of trash bags, or just semi trucks full of perlite?
Yeah, I assume they do the reverse of what they do when they blow it in, that they suck it out and put it into like semi truck, dump truck, whatever, but fairly quickly because there's going to be literally tons of it.
Yeah, the weight's not going to be the biggest issue; it's the volume at that point. But yeah, I get your point. This is still one of those ongoing questions that we will see the answer to, hopefully, because we really do want to see these tanks at current be reused one more time. The fact that they patched up that hole is a good sign. Another thing that we talked about, let me see if I can find the right photo here. So we'll take a second. Here we go. Close. Better. Okay. So you can see that there's kind of some structural issues with this tank.
Now,
It's just slightly crumbled. What are you concerned about?
And is it the tank or is it the outer cover?
It's the outer shell of this. It is a tank, but it's not holding anything back. It's
now the next tank over is the tank.
Yeah, this is a water tank. This is a shell for what was going to be a methane tank, but now it's just a shell for a water tank that's a 9-meter water tank on the inside. And I'm hoping that they will go through, put pressurization in here, keep everybody back, let it basically pop out. It's these creases that are kind of hard right here, and especially over here, where you do have some metal fatigue with the welds. You can't really trust them, but it would be better to put some pressure behind it, like a shipper booster. They've done that before, where it has crumpled a bit because of weight, and then they put pressure behind it, and it just pops it all back out and makes it look right as rain, just with a couple of bar of pressure.
Right as rain. That's a great phrase.
It's a good one because it's refreshing. It's back to what it should be. It's organic.
We have
Anyways.
lots of questions. I don't know if
let's go for them. Any of them. Let's do it.
Mauricio, you want to take them? You want me to take them? Go ahead, Indy. Oh, you take them. All right, I'll take them. Thanks, Mauricio. So there's a random question, or in random order. They're not just about the launch site. There was a question about the new Mega Bay, High Bay 2, Mega Bay 2, whatever you'd like to call it. They're asking, Ian is asking, could it actually be a payload integration bay, like a semi-clean room? Do you have thoughts on that?
They could make this a clean room environment, but they could also do the same thing for High Bay or the current Mega Bay. They would have to basically go through and have a door basically be placed on it, and then they'll have to have air conditioning on the building itself. So right now they do have some of that on High Bay with some air conditioning, and inside of this building, for instance, there is some air conditioning present. They'll probably put air conditioning out here as well and to the right. But anyways, the bays themselves, any of them could basically have doors installed and basically become a cleaner room environment. It's not going to be perfect. So, for instance, the integration facility that we talk about, it's like the lowest level grade for clean room environment. This would basically be at that or just below it because you open up those doors, a lot of dust and debris can come in. They're fairly large, but you would probably start off with either Mega Bay, or sorry, High Bay, or the first Mega Bay to do that. But again, you could still do the Michael Bay.
Goodness.
I love that.
Someone made a point, though, that I thought that was very funny. They said if it was Michael Bay, wouldn't that have to include explosions? And we don't do explosions in Starbase.
Well, no. At the end is the explosion. It's the rocket going up and either exploding or just the nice flamey end of the rocket you're looking at.
Fair enough. And then I like this question. This is a good one. I don't know how much you know about Stoke Space, but the mini Dr. M asks, is the plate like the Stoke Space heat shield? I assume the water cooling plates, maybe?
See if I've got the picture of it easily to access here. Let's take 1 second. So Stoke Space, they have a very interesting setup for how they are building their entire rocket. Oh, I've got way too many images to find. Never mind.
So cool. If they were down here, man, they might be the third company I work for.
They're quite an amazing company. Like the way they're building their rocket. Oh, actually found it.
It's only a matter of time with you, Thomas. You always find it in just enough time.
I just scrolled through like 1,000 images and I just randomly found it.
Not random if you're looking for it and you scroll to it.
Right. I knew it was in there, but I've got actually how many thousands of pictures?
Time, don't worry.
I've got 6,000 images. I just scrolled through and I randomly got this one. So, yeah, this is the one that EDA has gone and seen the static fire of, and it's interesting. They only do every other one. So the question was about the heat shielding, correct? So,
yeah,
they
asking
used
if the plate is similar to the heat shield that they use here.
So the plating is similar in the fact it's stainless steel and it has holes in it. Otherwise, no. So this is basically the engine mount point where the engines go through and come out the exhaust of this side. Whereas Starship, the engines would basically be the inlets for the pipes would basically be the size. And then the bottom of the ship itself has basically a compartment, an engine compartment where all of the pipes and everything else is at, and then they basically go through and pressurize that and remove all the gases. So it is a very different system than what Stoke Space is looking at. So Stoke Space is looking at what is it called? Aerojet. No, what is it called? Thinking of the exact.
The aerospikes?
Aerospike, yes. It is basically an aerospike using multiple engines. And then the heat shield system is also the engine system. It's brilliant and very simplistic as far as the design in some sense. This is a little bit complex with all the engines. You have to have those calibrated just right and all of them working. Otherwise, things kind of tend to be a little bit off, off nominal. But Stoke Aerospace is headed in a very interesting direction. So it's just getting back to the basic principles of the thing.
I believe he's from SpaceX as well. The owner. Head.
I think Yeah, I think he's another SpaceXer.
He is.
So I had
Many
a
of them.
thought. I had
Go
a
ahead.
thought, Thomas. I know where we can stash the perlite if we have to empty out the annular space in one of these tanks.
And just one thought, Dave?
Is it Booster 4?
No, it's the original water tank. You just drain it and use it as a perlite storage tank.
Well, as long as there's no water in there left over, then that's perfect. I love it. Let's do it.
I thought you'd appreciate that one. And maybe the perlite will push the dent out in that tank while it's at it.
Well, it wouldn't hurt as long as there's no water, because the issue with water is that it will degrade the perlite.
Yes.
It'll freeze and thaw. And it just turns it into dust, and then you lose your R value as well. So if you just have water, your R value for resistance of transfer heat is decreased. So let's say if you had insulation that was covered in water in your house, it'd be like, that stuff is not so good anymore, and it's cold outside. It's going into winter or something, and yeah, you're left with a very, very chilly house.
Yeah, I was just thinking about after I described, the company that installs the perlite also removes it. When you say you need semis to haul it all away, I'm like, wait a minute, we have this big empty waterish tank. That would be perfect.
Yeah, David's talking about specifically this tank right here, and popping out just those few dents. I think this is actually a thicker tank than these ones are, because it was supposed to hold the water itself, but it really did not hold water very well.
Well, it didn't hold all the water.
It only had water up to about here in this location, and then they kind of had to kill it here. You said we have some other random good
Yes,
questions to
lots
go
of good
through.
ones. The next question is from F14D, Jared C. Could SpaceX use large speakers to create destructive interference to reduce the damage from the acoustic energy? That's actually a good question.
I can answer that one.
Please do, Dave.
The answer is no. Unfortunately, sound suppression that way doesn't work when you have basically a random noise source.
She agrees with you too.
So that makes it a little hard, because you need the opposite phase of sound to do it, but it's just white noise.
So you're saying it's impossible. That means that SpaceX will do it and will spend trillions of dollars just to get the system to work once, and then it breaks because the heat killed it.
And speaking of somebody who has pretty pictures, Chrome Kiwi just gifted 5 RGB memberships, followed by Jim Cavett with the 6th.
And mind you, they're not the only ones. RP, Rocket Profit, donated 5 before that. And so did Jim Cavett. Jim Cavett donated 1. Upper is now a team member. Space Girl Falcon is a team member. Smurf Trooper is a team member. The Moon Man 4, Credence, Double Knot Spy, Kelsey D. I won't say your last name. There's also Jean-Francois and Ironhead, Nobby Clark, Stacy R, all members, as well as Steve Coates. Steve Coates is now a member as well. Welcome to all of you. Next question. From
Wait a minute.
Oh,
Rocket Profit just gifted 5 more.
Rocket Profit is minting friends now. Just kidding, RP.
I mean, that kind of is a way of minting friends. That is a literal definition of doing it.
Well, it's also a really nice way to get people involved in the tiers, because then you all who have been receiving these gifted memberships get to see all the photos that Mauricio releases in advance the same day he releases them. And you're also invited to join us in the show and tells, where we go over the photos together, all of us, everybody who comes and joins us in the chat that are paying subscribers. They can come in, have conversations with us. They can tell us what their theories are. They can join in the conversation. And then a lot of people have become regulars from just that. So it's also a good way to bring everybody into the crowd. So we also want to welcome Halo and Chris Lyons. And I think there are more. I have to scroll down, I think.
Daniel Norris, Mataj Zapan, and Cody Rathko.
Yeah, all those as well.
Yeah,
Congratulations.
you also
and
get
welcome.
to one other benefit is you can listen to us live in Discord.
Oh, yeah.
And you get the quality a little bit better because YouTube has a little bit of a delay, and sometimes it's degraded quality by a bit. Sometimes it's just me on Discord. Something's started backing up in the middle of
Mind
of
you,
our
this happens
stuff going on.
every single time. So it's always going to be at least once it's going to be because of Thomas's computer that Thomas bugs out.
Yeah, so those few times I've reduced it down as much as I can. So once a week is the major backups, and it's typically like Sunday to Monday night.
All right. Next question. Let's see. People ask funny questions sometimes. So there's a question from Crane Man who wants to know, and I don't know if you remember this, hopefully you do, could those corroded tables or frames be fit to the small plates on the deluge pipe to one of the plates like a jig?
So we were talking about that. I think that's a question we already answered, but yes,
good.
they could be. So just to rehash it as fast as possible, just in case it wasn't as direct, these basically plates that are down here could be welded directly to these plates, but they need a lot more structure. Like this is some structure, but is it enough to handle all of the weight that will basically be pressed down? So I would like to see more if that's the case.
There's a question, and Dave, do you know what ACOE stands for?
Army Corps of Engineers.
Thank you, sir. Daniel H. asks, when they replace the tank farm, will SpaceX have to get approval from the Army Corps of Engineers again, or first?
No, so this plot right here is the same plot they would use for the tank farm. Army Corps of Engineers, they really care about areas like this. So these are the lowlands where there is basically no vegetation. It basically floods all the time. That's really what they're worried about. So some of these areas, actually pretty much up to this silt fence line right here, but technically this area right here would be a little bit more in the highlands area. And so they're worried about basically degrading this environment. So there's the piping plover that's local to this area and this valley. It uses some of the material that's grown in the soil to basically eat. And then you want to go through and, for instance, take acre for acre or more in another area nearby that would basically allow them to have the piping plover use that environment or something along those lines. I'd probably have to pull up the Google map, but there is a location just up above all of this that's in the Laguna Madre basin, I guess you could say. This all used to be Laguna Madre, technically, so I'll show you here real quick.
And while we're killing time, Rocket Profit just donated another $20 for the chance to sling some green and make some friends.
Rocket Profit's so funny.
Okay, so this area is already being used. So I've looked at other Army Corps of Engineer maps for this spot. So a lot of this is like shrimp farming, other kind of industrial processes. There is an airport right here. It's the RGV Wing Command or Commemorative Airport.
Hey,
So
they have a whole airport for Mauricio.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so this is an area that is going to have some major changes taking place if they haven't already. Specifically because there is a LNG facility being put in right here. So this LNG facility, acre for acre, that they basically went through and are replacing some of this land with land that's in the same basically basin or the area. So that again was up here, this area. So you basically do the same thing for SpaceX. And in fact, I suspect that SpaceX is already acquiring rights or land permissions. So they they basically buy it or lease it from somebody else, and then that is then given over to let's say U.S. Fish and Wildlife. And so you have this kind of weird area that would have been like highlands and not the mud flats specifically. You have turned it into mud flats. So you've reconditioned the property, replanted everything that you need to make it just like the area that you've taken over, specifically for SpaceX, acre for acre or more.
Okay, there you go. And before we go too much further, and I'll ask you the next question. I just want to remind everybody to hit the like button if they like what they're hearing. Next week, Zach should be back And for all of you who are CSI Starbase lovers as well, you can plan on hopefully seeing a new video sometime this week. I won't tell you when exactly, but in the next week or so, you should see a video, which is probably why Mr. Zach is not here today. And so back to this, if you wouldn't mind hitting the like button if you like what you hear, if you hit the bell icon, that'll remind you when we have shows, because sometimes our shows are on Sunday. And become an RGV team member so you can get a hold of all of these photos in advance and come join us in the chats, because we like to have conversation. I don't know if you noticed, but we like to talk.
Also, everybody pray to the gods of weather and hope we get a clear day coming up in the next 3 or 4 so that RGV can go fly and get some more fantastic aerial photos.
Yes, please. And I'd say vote for a whole week of good weather just in case.
Oh, now we're praying and voting. Interesting politics and religion we've thrown together.
It all depends on how you think about it, really. Okay, and I'll ask you another question. There were a couple of questions about the crater underneath the OLM. There was a question about did they refill it, and have they finished digging it out?
So they haven't finished digging it out quite yet, I think. So the first part is they need to remove all the concrete. Then they are going to have to... we've seen some of the soil here. It's pretty much at the very end.
Slowly.
I'm sorry, but I had to zoom past it.
Understand stuff.
Okay, so this is the pile of debris that was under the orbital launch mount. So you can see some nice looking rebar and some wood for some reason. One thing that's a problem is that material like this can be compressible. There's quartz in here. So quartz is a compressible mineral. I'm not sure how much it would compress, but you'd get a funny little electric charges out of it. That's the same kind of quartz you would have in your watch, for instance. But just an interesting thought of maybe that's why it potentially collapsed, is some of that quartz and other materials just was compressed. Yeah.
100%.
So hopefully they put in larger friction piles, maybe those 5-foot ones that we're looking at that auger. They may just move it over and use those as well. And then they'll do a thicker concrete pad, I hope, because you do want it to not compress so much. And then you'll do the steel plates above that, and that's going to be the simple solution. It's just basically some fill dirt, some concrete, hopefully a lot of concrete, and then the steel plates.
And then real fast, 55 Chevy guy just jumped in the last minute and donated 5 memberships. And our lucky membership winners are, or gifted receivers are, Don D, Wither, Garth, Tel Vivance, and Rocket Man. By the way, tomorrow is Rocket Man's birthday, so everybody please wish Rocket Man a very happy birthday.
And you can keep reading because Jake Winlow just did another.
He did, and he also donated 5. And now we have Matt B, Jamie G, the Snicker Cat, the Village Idiot, wow, and James H, who are now members of the RGV aerial team. Welcome, everybody.
The Snickering Cat, I think, had something to do with the name for the last one.
Well, I know a lot of people that could play the last one. In any case, do you want to start it off, Dave, to say our goodbyes?
I will. Let's say goodbye to everybody, and hope to see you again next week for another week, and hopefully we'll have some more amazing aerial and ground photos from RGV. Mauricio is doing yeoman's work getting all these photos out every week. And with that, I will toss it to Mauricio.
Thanks, everybody. I want to thank everybody for donating and for joining us today. And we'll see you next week. 100 over Indian Star, Tim Thomas.
Well, thank you, Mauricio. It's been great, again, going through all these images with you this week, and I'll catch you again next week. And again, for everybody who is a Patreon member, if you'd like to.
Sure. And Chris L just donated 10 RGV memberships. They're all flying past very quickly. We want to welcome Trippy Dead, Run Crazy Dog, Caribou River, Craig Strauss, Captain Randall Fleming, Tim M, NTX Urban Homestead, Mark Beluski, 1-2, and I think that was 10. Hopefully that was 10. If not, welcome to everybody, first of all. If that wasn't 10, I can't count, but thank you. And for everyone else, thanks very much. See you next week. Oop, I'm supposed